Next level. Next level.
I was counting along with her, so I think we're about ready. But it sounds like we got something extra. Is it still there? All right. We'll try it with it. Now batting.
I told him not to go far.
There you go.
And please make sure all the microphones are on.
You need a green light at the base of your microphone.
Double duty.
All right. Oh, that sounds much better. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for May 2nd, 2023. On our agenda this evening, we've got the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation update, Wheeler retail space lease discussion, tobacco tax update, tobacco tax funding requests, and the grants program update. We're going to get right into our agenda by starting with our Hunter Creek Historical Foundation update. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Great, well, thanks for having us. Just for the record and quick introductions, I'm George Newman, and we'll just go right down the line.
I'm Howie Mallory.
Ann Mullins.
Graham Means.
Tim McFlynn.
So we're missing one other board member, who is Dale Will. He's probably working next door at the county. We're going to do sort of a short show and tell presentation. Give you an update, and maybe some of you are not aware of the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation, the work we're doing up on the historic Coke homestead up on Hunter Creek. And I think you'll find it pretty interesting. I'll have a few slides to let you know the work we did last year. We'll be showing a short video that was filmed up there on site this past December as well as part of the program. So I think just starting off then, I'm going to turn this over to Howie, and he could just give you the when and the why the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation was formed, and why it's so important that you know about it for the city of Aspen, your residents and your visitors as well.
All right, can you hear me okay? Hi, yeah, I'd like to give it just a couple of thoughts of how the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation emerged and evolved over the last 2.5 years, and what's the relationship and we think the value for Aspen as a city and a community. So it all began back in 2020. We can all dial back to that blank time in our memory when everyone stayed closer to home. And what that meant was a lot of people, instead of getting on planes going far away, went out in their backyards. And Hunter Creek was the backyard that I spent a lot of time in. As a matter of fact, everybody at the table here was hiking up there and enjoying the pastoral scene. And it so happened that, just a little bit of an anecdotal history, Graham Means and I were up there the same day and ran into each other, and we're really enjoying the late spring afternoon. But we also had passed by the shop, which is the building, in this photograph, the building to the far left, and the metal building, which is on the right there. The metal building standing strong and sturdy, but the insides are just covered with awful graffiti. It's sort of a hangout for, none of us can remember being teenagers and young adults, but there was residue from parties, more than one occurrence up there. So the building was really pretty well trashed on the inside, and the shop was tilting over very badly. And that was disturbing enough, but when we looked down the hill, we saw the remnants of the old barn that used to be there, and that fell down in 1990. So during our lifetime, all of this is going on up in Hunter Creek, and we felt that if we didn't do something, all of a sudden Hunter Creek wouldn't have its history represented by the structures up there. But Graham and I knew, and we couldn't do it all by ourselves, so we made contact with George and Tim and Dale, and we were most worried about the shop because it had about a 25-degree tilt from the west to the east, and we weren't sure it was even going to make it through the next winter. knowing that the Forest Service, the owner of these buildings, the property is owned by the Forest Service, unfortunately couldn't really care if the buildings went down. Their idea of historical protection is let it go back to where it came from. They wouldn't be interested unless they were encouraged, would be interested to protect the building. So we wanted to keep the shop up and erect as much as possible. So under cover of full daylight sun, Graham and I and George and Tim went into the shop and put in some diagonal beams, diagonal braces. Bill, you'll understand this, to straighten it up, and then some strapping running horizontally to hold the building up and try to get it through the upcoming winter. And it worked. In the meantime, we made contact with the Forest Service. I reached out to Scott Fitzwilliam, the White River National Forest supervisor, and wrote him a letter about our plans. He then favorably passed it on to Kevin Warner, Soper District Ranger, who then passed it on to the Deputy District Ranger, Jennifer Schuler, who came up and had a site visit with us, along with Tom Fuller, the Heritage Officer of the White River National Forest based in Glenwood. And Tom has been critical because he then put us in touch with the Historic Corps operation out of Morrison, Colorado, whose business is to help stabilize and protect old buildings on municipal and governmental and private property. And through that, we were able to get approval by the Forest Service to begin phase one, which we completed last summer, which was the stabilization of the shop. So what does this all have to do with Aspen? Well, the history of this area was that the Koch family, Koch Park that we all take so much pride in today, was related to the Koch family up in Hunter Creek, where they ran really kind of the breadbasket of Aspen. It was fortunately above the town, not kind of caught up in the mud and the muck of Aspen. They ran a dairy farm up there. So milk, vegetables, etc., came out of that area during the 1880s and 1890s. Also, one of the buildings up further up the creek from these two is called the Dam Keeper's Cabin, which was the sort of the employee housing for the manager, the engineer who ran the riprap dam, which captured water to put it into the head. Is that the right term? The head? Great head for the Aspen power plant to run the electrical system of Aspen. So there's always a connection between Aspen and Hunter Creek in that regard. And more recently, it's important to Aspen for two other reasons. Back in 1960, there was a strong proposal on the books through the county commissioners to put a 1,200 unit subdivision up in Hunter Creek, driving up Red Mountain Road. So you can imagine what that would have done to the flavor and sense of community of Aspen. So with that, also in 1985, Tim, 1995, the protection of the toll road access to Lanedo is another part of where the citizens of Aspen have benefited from the protection of Hunter Creek. So with that, that's sort of the history of how we got formed. Hunter Creek Historic Foundation, 501c3, and we're headed towards phase two in the fall of this year. And the history with Aspen has been long-term and strong, and will continue to be that way particularly once we get these buildings stabilized. So with that, I'll pass it on to...
Howie, can I ask, is there any recent history I should be aware of, or we should be aware of, between the city of Aspen since the founding of your organization? Has there been any funding, any cooperation?
No, we've done it. We've all self-funded and got donations, received donations from individuals. We also work with Trust for Public Land, with a family that's funded it, made a donation through that. We've received a grant from Ghost Town Club of Colorado, who thought our effort was noteworthy. And during the completion of phase one, the stabilization of the shop, and now our phase two, which will start this year, we received a nomination for being one of the most important endangered spaces of Colorado and that we're saving. So that was done through Colorado Preservation, Inc. And that was largely the nominations thanks to Ann Mullins, who put us in that.
Not entirely.
Well, you helped get us some attention down there.
Thanks, and
Yeah,
thanks for all that you're doing up there. What is the primary objective of the update that you're giving us
I'll
tonight?
let Graham speak to that.
Okay, thanks.
Our objective is to stabilize the buildings as they are now. We don't have a lot of information, or hardly any, about what they were in the past. So they are all in somewhat danger of falling down, some more than others. We would like to, basically, if you go by there in a couple of years when we're done, you won't know that we did anything. We think we did our job well. We are aware that the access up there is difficult, and we are not trying to make something like an Ashcroft or a Town of Independence. We would like this to be a very quiet site, and we would like to have the people who walk by kind of wonder what happened there, as opposed to a lot of signs saying this happened, that happened, blah, blah, blah. So it's a very kind of well, not underwhelmed, but a low-key presence that we would like to have up there.
That's great. I still don't, maybe you're waiting for this, but I'm curious, like, how we fit into the picture. That would help me understand the whole.
They're here to share what they're doing and their update. If there's an opportunity for the city to partner in or support their efforts, they're open to that. But as of right now, this is an opportunity to grow awareness about what's going on.
Got it. Just awareness.
Right.
For the most
Thank you. That's what I was
We're
trying to
teeing
understand.
it up for you.
Thank you.
How many structures are up there? Is it just these few? Are there
Well, it
others?
depends on how you count them. There's one that's down on the ground.
Right.
There's the roadhouse, which is a prominent one there, the shop in the back, there's an outhouse there, and then there's an older log cabin back in the trees, and then there's the dam keeper's cabin, which is about a half a mile up the creek by the dam.
And then, with all respect to Howie and sharing some of the history that he just did, can you just, why is it important that we save, places and structures like this? I think that our community needs to be reminded. So I don't know if Tim, if you'd like to,
I'd like to just say, if you think about how critical that valley and Adelaide Ranch on the CoA property was to the mining town of Aspen in its earliest years. It's part of the history of now this town, and knowing more, not only you, but everyone who's able to learn more about that early history, just like the Quiet Years book was so useful to everyone to learn about after the mining era up until after the war. And the history of the Hunter Creek Valley is the history of early Aspen. They wouldn't have had hydropower, the first sawmill to build the houses in Aspen, and the timbers in the mines. They wouldn't have had the dairy farm and the produce farm because there was no farming in Aspen. It was down valley where there was sun and water being brought up by horse trains and mule trains. Here it came down a short hillside because there were year-round people up there feeding this town. And if you look at the history of this foundation on the website that Tim Cooney wrote, you'll see that he calls it the breadbasket. The breadbasket of Aspen. And I didn't know that. Perhaps none of you knew that until we started this effort. And the effort, we think our mission includes helping everyone learn the history, see the history, hike up there, enjoy the history. And the most remarkable thing of all, and then I'll be quiet, all of you know who go up there, it's remarkable 140 years later that it's never been developed. It's remarkable. It's right there. Why aren't there subdivisions and hotels and No, that's remarkable. And that's because the community cared to save it. And that's the relevance of what
It's
we're
a great
doing.
amenity.
Thank you for that.
So I'm going to just show you a few slides in terms of the work that we did last fall. You've sort of got oriented up here. For those in the audience who's not aware, this is just 2 miles right up Hunter Creek. And this is the Koch homestead, also called the Adelaide Ranch, that Bill Koch, William C. Koch named it. And it's already been discussed, but this Koch homestead was instrumental in the early development of Aspen. And the video will sort of go into that a little bit. So back to your question, I mean, this is where Aspen started. The first white men who came into the valley came over Hunter Creek before Ashcroft, about the same time as Independence passed. So a lot of history here that this community has been built on. So this is a site, and this is a shop. This is phase one. You can sort of see how tenuous this building was. We weren't really sure how this was going to work out. And as Howie said, we contracted with another nonprofit organization called HistoriCorps, and they work throughout the country on federal lands, restoring, preserving, and stabilizing historic buildings that the Forest Service doesn't have the funds to do. And they utilize volunteers, and volunteers come from around the country. And last fall, we had 4 different groups of volunteers for 4 weeks, came up to Hunter Creek, and were working on these buildings. Here they are putting on a new roof, and they also did siding. So that was a week of work right there. As we were working around the shop, these were a lot of the artifacts that were discovered around the shop. These were all taken down to the White River National Forest headquarters in Glenwood, where they're being archived right now. And we're anticipating that a lot of these pieces will go back to the shop and will be on display inside. So a lot of history here. These are the volunteers. They camped right on site, just past the gate. They were up there for a month, a different group each week. We had Forest Service permission, obviously, to do that. It's on Forest Service land. And this is the end of the day, and they're just kind of relaxing. There was a kitchen, cook's tent set up there with a camp manager who took care of all those chores. And then this was the finished product. This is how that shop came out. You'll see there's a little drainage issues on the right-hand side that we're going to be addressing this summer. That was a temporary issue, laying down that plastic. And we've got some hog wire there that we're going to do some work on that to make that a little more amenable so people can look in and see what that building looks like. So that was that's what we did last fall. And we'll be talking about what we're doing this coming fall shortly. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Ann. Ann has been involved and is involved with this organization that Howie mentioned, Colorado Preservation, Inc., for many, many years. And she was really helpful in terms of us putting together an application to that organization to get listed on what they call their Endangered Places Program list, which is quite a coup in all of our hats for that. So I'll let Ann talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. For the record, I'm Ann Mullins. And to answer, Tori, a little bit further answer to your question. You know, we're always talking about building a sense of community, solidifying a sense of place. And understanding our history has an enormous amount to do with pride in your community, understanding how your community has evolved, even the idiosyncrasies of previous events. I think it was one of the first winters, there were 8 people, 4 up here and 4 down in Aspen, and all they had for the winter was an elk and a barrel of whiskey or something, and that was it. But, you know, knowing these stories and being able to tell these stories really does help. Sense of community, pride in your community. So I'm really happy to be here with the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation because they've done a good job. I do want to tell you a little bit more about Colorado Preservation, Inc., usually called CPI. They were founded in 1984 as a nonprofit to advocate for historic preservation in Colorado. Started as a grassroots effort of about 43 citizens and has now grown into a nonprofit with 4 full-time staff, offices in a historic building on Capitol Hill in Denver, the old Emerson School, support from across the nation, and 5 really well-known programs. This is a very strong state organization. It puts on the Saving Places Conference, which is the largest statewide historic preservation conference in the country. It does the Most Endangered Places program, which I'll go into a little more detail. Dana Crawford and State Honor Awards celebration annually. Preservation Services, which help with nonprofits writing grants, grant administration, easement management, project management, and then advocacy efforts at the state level, which include promoting state historic tax credits for the state. CPI was also responsible for 2 really important spinoffs, and this is where it's impacted Aspen. One of the spinoffs is the Colorado Scenic and Historic Byways Program, which was started in '86. And you may not know, or you may know that Highway 82 is one of the 26 scenic highways in the state. And so it gets support from this, and this is actually a state office, gets support in the way of grants and promotion and other types of support from the Byways program. And then Historic Corps, which both George and Howie talked about, it was a spinoff from CPI. It's a really interesting model. It's a nonprofit that trains volunteers in preservation and restoration skills, and then Historic Corps manages projects using these volunteers as labor to do projects such as the homestead last summer and then more work this summer. So CPI has affected Colorado and Aspen in a couple of different ways. Real quick, the Endangered Places program, it's the 25th year. The program will provide for this site advocacy, awareness, technical assistance. The way you get into this program is quite an honor. There are applications from 7 different regions around the state. There's a regional meeting that I went to, and we were shortlisted to 2 or 3 applications from, you have the application put together by the foundation, and they did a great job with this application. And then they choose a reviewer, CPI does, and luckily they chose me, and I said, oh yeah, I'm happy to review that. And so then I go to a regional meeting and promote this application, and we got shortlisted. Then we go to the state meeting, and again, there's a shortlist project from all the regions. 5 different applications were chosen this year out of probably 48 applications across the state. So it's quite an honor to be part of this program. And it's also, the program will be invaluable, the collaboration and partnership and the support we'll get from CPI for this site. So that's just a quick overview of the program and what it does for the foundation and for Aspen.
Great, thanks, Ann. So if I could find, I may need some IT help again. Oh, let's wait on that now. You ready to go? Yeah, let's wait on that. Let's do that afterwards. This is a short video that again was filmed in conjunction with our being listed as one of the 5 endangered places in Colorado. It was done on site with all of us December 30th in the heart of winter. And the news editor from CBS Denver Channel 4 came up, interviewed us all for about 4 hours, edited down to about 3 minutes, which was shown at the conference and also shown on CBS Channel 4 this past winter. And it's kind of a fun short video, but it gives you a different perspective. So let's see. Just start. And where do I make full screen? I'm going to need help again. So let's just start it, because it didn't unmute either.
You can look quite a ways in every direction and you will not see another building.
Graham Means and fellow members of the Hunter Creek Historical Foundation have been hiking the Hunter Creek Valley above Aspen for over 50
It's not
years.
showing on the
When I
screen.
first came out to Colorado in
Can you guys hear that?
Not yet.
Not yet, you'll be able to, I think GrassRoots will be able to, I can't do anything with the volume on this.
It should come through.
You can look. Quite a ways in every direction and you will not. While they're doing this.
Go ahead.
Let me just add another comment. When we started this, we were digging up some history and preserving some buildings, and it's amazing how much this has spread through the community, and this has turned into a project that is building community now, which I know is a really big topic these days. It goes so far beyond who's sitting up at this table. The Forest Service, Pickett County Open Space and Trails, the Trust for Public Land gave some very generous donation, and numerous other entities and private donors who have been very generous. This is all privately raised money. And so the support that we've seen and just the amount of interest and enjoyment that we've gotten out of it, and so many other people who have got involved, this is a community project for now. And it's really neat the way that has sort of turned out in an unexpected way.
Bless you.
Is it just a time lapse there?
If it turns out that it won't show and you can't hear it, if you're interested at any time, you can go on the website. And if you go on the website, you'll see this video front and center on the home page. You hit the button, you can watch the video.
And what is the address for the website?
Hunter Creek Historical Foundation.org.
It's a good website, too. And as Tim said, we have had Tim Cooney investigate the history of the Hunter Creek Valley and write a paper, which is also on the website. So this is a research into the history of the area, as well as stabilizing the buildings.
But can they hear it?
No, sir.
Can you pull it up
Can
on?
you just pull it up on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's on, oh, pull it up on YouTube, because it's on there. It is, I've got it.
I'm not a tech weenie, that's.
She's savvy.
Overstay our welcome.
No. Maybe we've done a good enough job here.
That's right. While they're doing that, I just want to express my appreciation for what you've done up there. It's such a great amenity and asset to the community, and I love spending time up there.
You go up there, everybody here is familiar with it.
I am.
Sam said he mountain bikes up there almost every day. And what I would say is any of you who want to go up when we're up there, we'd be happy to show you what we're doing and what we're going to do next. It'll be gorgeous with the snow melting and the flowers growing.
And my kids screaming in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
The work happens mainly in September, And that's when Historic Corps comes up here, sets up their camp, and for 5 weeks this fall, they'll be up there working on that main house, the road, what we call the roadhouse. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, we'll give it a
Go
shot.
ahead.
All right.
Can look quite a ways in every
Can
direction,
look
and you will
quite a
not see
ways in every direction, and you will not see another
Get
building.
sound through.
Can you hear that at all on your end?
That's pretty light.
If you use a city computer, if you pull up the website, could you
Sure.
look it up? It doesn't have to be
Give
this,
that-
my computer.
Give that a shot.
Just go to 100creekhistoricalfoundation.org. And then you could hit, the front page will say video.
We'd be glad to address any questions or anything.
Yeah. Give me a second.
We got it under control.
Yeah, we'll give it another minute. If we can get the video up, great. If we have to direct people to the webpage, we will do so.
Yeah.
Also,
Especially after seeing what you accomplished up in Maralt.
Pardon?
Especially after seeing what you accomplished up in Maralt.
Yeah, that's a fun project.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Howie.
These are passed out at the most endangered places conference down in Boulder in March. So the question is, can you identify on the front page?
No, okay.
Not happening?
So
Okay.
we're just about in the middle of the brochure.
All right. No luck, Joseph? Okay. All right. We're going to have to direct people to the video. Thank you guys so much for coming. I echo what Bill said. Thank you so much. I mean, it is not that far away, but often, people forget that that is part of Aspen and our history. And really the reason I asked you that is just to remind everybody. As so many people say, you learn lessons from the past in order to chart your future. And I think this is one of those great examples. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, each of you.
Thanks a lot.
George, can you email the link to city council or email it to me and I'll forward it to council for the video?
Yeah,
Great, thanks.
thank you.
All right. On our agenda then, that is going to bring us to the Wheeler Retail Space Lease discussion.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Just trying to share my screen here.
You can try.
There we go.
Joseph's,
Good news, I have no video. Oh, there we go.
Cute.
So I'm here tonight, thank you, to talk to you about the Wheeler Opera House tenant space. Here is a photo of the most current use of that space. It is Valley Fine Art. I'll note that Mia Valley, the proprietor of Valley Fine Art, is here this evening. Just as background, it's a small retail space, about 497 square feet, on the Millside Street of the Wheeler Opera House. The current lease expires on November 30th. The Wheeler Advisory Board, as you saw in your memo, has recommended renewing the lease with Valley Fine Art, and we respect their input. After conversation, however, the staff recommendation is to issue an RFP simply so we can identify all potential uses for the space, and we want council direction on this particular question, and I'll have those questions for you in this slide. And Mayor, I don't know if you want to take questions one by one. I'm happy to take notes if you want to have a larger conversation, but these are really the three questions that we would like direction for so that we can proceed.
Thank you for that. We will take a couple questions first and see if there's any information that folks need before we move into these questions specifically. Anything? Do you have any questions? I'll start then. I don't have in my packet, I don't have a copy of either the lease terms or the original lease, meaning, you know, when this was set out to lease to an operator, was there anything at the time that set terms or length of terms or renewal opportunities, or even some informative language that talked about what the expectations were?
I can't speak to the very first time that a lease was signed with Valley Fine Art. I believe that was in 2006. We do have existing leases now that talk about terms and renewal options. But I might ask Jim True if he has any recollection about the direction or the intent of the
I don't recall specifically the commencement of the lease, but and I don't have in front of me the current lease to direct the
I do.
terms out, okay? But, you know, we've had this agreement with this operator for a while, and it has been renewed at least a couple of times, I believe. And I know there were some additional concessions made during some of the construction on the facade of the building. But I believe that it's been in operation for some time now and been a good tenant as far as the city's concerned. I don't know if you want to go through the specific terms. Diane just pulled them up.
Yeah, I've got the 2011 lease, which I think, Mia, is that the current one? Right. And so that one.
Well, the extension plus the extension.
Plus the extensions. And that one had a term of initial period of 5 years, and then an additional period of 5 years at the option of the tenant. And then city council during COVID and the construction of the facade period further extended the lease such that it will be up in November.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay. We can get to our questions then. Unless council wants any other information or any input.
Might be helpful to understand if anyone recalls what other historical uses were in this space prior to Valley Fine Art. Does anyone know that?
I don't know.
So for at least 16 years, it's been an art gallery. I think it may have been part of the restaurant space before, but I'm unsure. I'm sorry, I'm not aware.
No problem.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Just curious.
I believe you're right. I think that space was, because I kind of remember us putting in the divider wall between those two spaces. So I think you are correct. Mia, do you know the history there prior to your lease?
Yeah, there were a few. Mia, if you don't mind, would you come on up to the table so we can get you on the mic? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
There was a glass gallery there for many years, and then it sat empty for probably, I can't remember exactly, but it did sit empty for a few years before I rented it, but it was never anything historical was in there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Since you're at the table, and you are the current tenant, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak if you'd like.
Okay, great. I didn't plan on this, so, but it's great. Thank you for the opportunity. I have been in the space and have been a loyal tenant for all these years. I've always paid my rent, never had a problem. I'm probably the quietest tenant ever. Anyway, I've gone through a lot with this space. I've had to move out once and close my business for 8 months. I endured while they cut my space in half. It was always a space. The divider was put in, but it was just changed the configuration. It made it smaller.
Right.
Yeah. So then I had to remodel and rebuild after that remodel, which, is just part of it. But the one thing, when I first moved in there, the city said, yeah, you can stay as long as you like. And so it never occurred to me. But, it is what it is. Other than that, I just, hope that I can renew. I just wonder how expensive it would be to keep renewing or finding and renewing a different person if they don't make it and, all of that. So, yeah,
Thanks. All right, thank you.
thank you.
All right. Question for council here is, do we want to go out to RFP for potential bids for the tenant space? And that includes me as opportunity to reapply as well. So I'll start around the table and just ask for your input or comments or your direction on this question.
Thank you, Tori. I would like to see an RFP. I don't see the harm in it, and I just feel like that's doing our due diligence.
Okay. John?
Well, I'd just like to thank Mia for being an exceptional tenant. And I don't know, this is a tough one, just because I do think we should support the Wheeler board and their decision as well. That's kind of important to me. But I guess the bottom line, in order to be fair to everyone, is I think I'm leaning towards an RFP, because I do think Mia's experience in that space speaks volumes about her.
I appreciate that. Bill, if you want.
Sure.
If you want to now, there's a follow-up question to this, obviously, so. But yeah, if you
My
want to-
comments might accidentally address both, if that's okay.
I think they will. Go right ahead.
Firstly, Mia, I'm sensitive to the fact that you've been a great tenant and that this is your business, and I'm empathetic to that. But I'm not sure that, I'm certain that an art gallery is not what this community needs most at the moment. And I believe that what this community needs most is affordable food and beverage in a space like this that we control. And I think that this is a rare opportunity to do something and to do something now. So I definitely support an RFP. I would encourage that we do an RFP with explicit instructions for responses on quick service / grab and go food and beverage. I don't think it should be direct competition to our adjacent restaurant tenant, but I think that's the hole that I would be interested in filling right away. I think that would be a tremendous community benefit. I hope that there would be several responses to that RFP, but I can envision all sorts of uses that might work, especially given the limited restaurant infrastructure. I'm aware of that and understand that, but I do think that there are food and beverage concepts that could work there, and so I strongly support an RFP and recommend that we solicit that with some parameters.
Thank you for that. And that was kind of the follow-up on this conversation, is about the uses and what you're thinking. So I want to just stay on this conversation before we move past it. So Sam, what is your feeling there about, if we go out to an RFP, what would you be putting in that RFP? Bill's suggestion is not to maintain a gallery space and such, and very, very much is thinking about what he described to me earlier today as grab and go, a sandwich counter, whatever it may look like, to go sushi, something, but a food service. If you support going out to an RFP, what would you think you'd include in that RFP? Would you stick to art gallery uses? Would you open it up to, would you just ask for proposals in a food and beverage line? What do you envision?
Food and beverage, I sort of feel the same way about Bill about this. And as far as like the gaps that I'd love to see filled, Great Fidelity closes at 4, Big Rap closes at 6. I'd love to see affordable food and beverage during the day, but also into the evening, and I think that spot could be great for it, potentially.
I would say currently that is a city building, as you guys know. we currently are housing a tenant at this space, at this location, that does food and beverage. Should we not be talking to them about the food and beverage options that they do and what they do? I mean, they're already at this exact spot. They are already open. In the summer, they will be open day through night. So there's a food and beverage opportunity here. I just am wondering, to redouble right there, I just don't know if that's.
The difference to me is that's like a sit-down restaurant versus like a Big Rap Grateful Deli type place. That's the sort of like thing that those are the two that I always name that I think is lacking, and that's what the difference is to me between the spaces.
And I would invite them to
Yeah.
reply to the RFP if they want to, but I don't think they should be the only direction we pursue.
John?
Noting that this space is 497 square feet, I'd be interested to know how much space, say, the Big Rap takes up, just to see if that type of operation would even be possible in a space this small. I'm aware that the former Lucci's space is going to be opened as a restaurant, but that sat idle for years because I believe one of the factors holding it up was a hood to facilitate cooking. So this particular space has some limitations to what can be done there as far as food service. So again, a little more research into how much space is necessary, I think would go a long way for me to supporting changing it from what it is into a food space. I do agree, it'd be nice to have another cheap place to get food, but I know the restaurant business is difficult.
Thanks.
Could I address John's comment? So I don't think that there's a big difference in size between Big Rap and this space. I think Grateful Deli's even smaller. And I think there's a lot of food and beverage concepts that you could do that don't even require, gas cooking equipment or hoods, like a poke bowl, a sushi, sandwiches, salads.
I understand.
Yeah, so I think that the free market could come up with some creative concepts that could work in that space, is my ultimate point.
Well, this brings us to a difficult point in this conversation. You have a couple of folks that are up for going out to an RFP. You have one that's lukewarm or middle here, but I don't know about the pursuit after that. If we were to support going to an RFP, and I got some feedback from Ward today. Ward was supportive of the Wheeler Board recommendation, but he's not at the table. For me, I believe that going out to an RFP is appropriate, but not if that is kind of leading us on a course that may not be chartable. I agree with John. Maybe there's more discussion that needs to go around this, or maybe we issue an RFP that has those opportunities available. I don't know what that looks like for our city staff to wrangle with an RFP that leaves it open to both food and beverage or gallery space. But,
So it may be quite a good idea to do that. So to put out an RFP that you could go as far if you wanted to of general community use and see what you get. We could also narrow it to gallery and grab and go food service.
okay.
We could specify it either way, and I think you're smart. You've all recognized the limitations of this space, and retrofitting it for cooking would be nightmares. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll support going to an RFP. I don't support, I don't think a food space and grab and go works there. I think that we should be looking at the public house and getting our expectations for that met through them. The city also has another space right outside our windows here that's gonna be reopened. We have another city subsidized lease space out at the golf course. As we said, we put conditions on another property that's going to be opening in the next, hopefully months, downstairs where Lucci's used to be. So I think we're doing a lot of efforts. The Armory is something that we continually talk about, opening as a food court and having affordable options. So I don't know that that's the best idea, but I'm willing to put it in an RFP if that's amenable to you guys and see what we get. I will actually tell you, my feeling going into this was that I thought a gallery co-op or a arts, something that still stays in the arts for our community would probably be the best use of this space. I also didn't get a chance to talk to Lisa Rigby-Peterson about what the Wheeler might see as a best ancillary space. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities. I would like to see it stay with the arts and not go to food service, considering there's a restaurant sitting next door to it. But that's me. So what I'm hearing here is there is support to issue the RFP, and we will try to structure that RFP along the lines of gallery opportunities as well, just opening up. And we'll have more conversation about that.
I would suggest we narrow it just to arts gallery uses or affordable food and beverage.
I appreciate that. I meant, not gallery, but yes, arts.
Sure. Arts or food and beverage, or maybe there's some combination of the two that we're not even thinking of.
All right. Comfortable? Good?
Thanks.
Let's see. Last question on here is just about lease agreements.
Lisa, could you clarify that question?
Yes.
It's a little vague.
Yes, there are a couple of different kinds of leases that we have in effect. One is simply a rental rate. Another lease has a rental rate plus a profit share above a certain gross sales. There are also the opportunities to think if there is an arts co-op, for instance, that is a nonprofit organization, is that an arts need that city can help fill at a very, very low price or no rent. I think it just depends on who the tenant might be, and being able to know that there are different ways that we could approach the negotiation for the lease terms is what we're looking for.
The answer for me is yes. I'm not looking to maximize revenue, but I definitely think that there are lease terms that could be beneficial to both parties. So I'm a yes for allowing some kind of terms that works best for everybody.
Yes for flexibility.
Same. No reason.
I think I'm a cautious yes, and I'm cautious because I don't want to give the impression that we are subsidizing a private business if we end up selecting a food and beverage business, for example, at the expense of free market competitors in Aspen. So I think it's yes, depending on who we end up with.
Well, and allowing for that flexibility
That's right.
to make sure that it does go that way. I appreciate that.
And thank you. Thank you for all that input. I'll just share with you what our proposed timeline would be since you're recommending an RFP. This would be the suggested timeline, given the November 30th expiration of the lease. Publishing it sometime in early June, leaving that RFP open through early to mid-July, giving us a month for our review committee to review all of the proposals, have a recommendation, new lease in September, and then if any improvements or modifications need to be made to the tenant space, we would do that in December into early January with a target date of February 1st as the new lease beginning.
Council, how does this hit you? I would say this, I don't know why we would be doing improvements and modifications in December and January. If this needed a longer timeline, I would put on the table for discussion an extension of the current lease for a few months to make this work go down next spring, because it doesn't seem like we can move it up to this fall. no, we cannot move it up to this fall. So I don't know that we would want to move forward with closing something December and January.
I tend to agree, and I also think an opportunity to really advertise this opportunity and make sure that we are getting a good amount of RFP responses, and make sure that potential prospective tenants and responders to the RFP have an opportunity to get into the space and really tour it at times that are convenient to Mia, that wouldn't be intrusive to her business. I think obviously everyone's got to get in there and meet with contractors and envision things. So I think front-loading some flexibility, some additional time is valuable.
Does that make sense to you guys? Do you think that's stupid what I just said, or are you supportive? Does that make sense, or you think so?
It makes sense to me, yeah.
Diane? Sorry.
Yes, no, we can definitely do that. I think two things. One, to your point, it will likely depend on who it is, right? So we may need to extend the lease. Someone may come in and say, no, I can work with this space. I'm just going to do some minor tenant improvements, and that's it. So that's a TBD. Right, and I appreciate hearing from council that a majority of you are willing to do a lease extension, right? That provides us some flexibility, and obviously we'd want to if Mia was not the successful bidder, we would want to give her adequate notice as well. Second thing I did want to mention is one possible addition to this timeline is because this is arts and possible gallery and affordable food and beverage, with that bigger range, which opens it up to nonprofits and for-profits, if we find ourselves with a wonderful basket of options here that are very different, you will likely see us come back for a work session to talk about possible uses. If it is the case that we get 2 gallery submissions and that's all, staff will come to you with a recommendation at that point. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think one point of clarity, as Tori mentioned, is that it would be a short-term lease extension. So we're not talking about a year. I mean, several months to get, where the improvements could happen in April, May. Not anything longer than that. Is that right?
That's the goal. That would be the goal. It's just not to have empty space in the middle of our winter when that's not necessary. And if Mia is not continues her lease, then I'm sure perhaps a winter season would be good to have. So with that in consideration. Other questions for us, Lisa?
No, I think I have all the information I need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
I want to make one last disclosure. I think the world of Mia Valley. She has been my neighbor as I live across the street for as long as she's been there. So Mia, you have been not just a wonderful tenant, but a wonderful neighbor. And more than that, I mean, you're part of Aspen. You're an amazing community member as well. So I appreciate you endlessly. And it is hard for me to even make decisions like this, but in this job, I try to do the best I can for my entire community. So I hope you'll understand that and respect that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, let's move on our agenda then.
Sure.
Next item up for us is the tobacco tax
All right,
update.
Catherine. Nice to see you. Thanks very much.
Air hug. Hi.
Thank you.
Catherine, good to see you.
All right. Good evening, Aspen City Council, Mayor Tory. I am CJ Oliver, Director of Environmental Health and Sustainability for the City of Aspen, and joining me at the table today is Catherine Sand, the Executive Director of Aspen Family Connections. We're here tonight to provide you guys with an update on the expenditures of the tobacco tax that is in action here in Aspen. So I am not the main show tonight. That is all about Catherine, but I do want to provide a little bit of context and background before I turn the table over to Catherine to really talk about the incredible work that Aspen Family Connections is doing with Aspen's tobacco tax funds. But to get us started, just provide a little bit of background on this. Aspen's tobacco tax originated from a ballot measure that went to the public in November of 2017. That vote turned up a margin of 75% in favor and 25% opposed to a local tobacco tax in Aspen. This was the first of its kind in the state of Colorado. That tobacco tax had some specifics about it. It proposes a $3 a pack tax on cigarettes with a 10-cent a year escalator to take the eventual price for a pack of cigarettes, or the eventual tax on a pack of cigarettes, up to $4. In addition, it also has a 40% tax on non-cigarette tobacco items, so chewing tobacco, vaping cartridges, and those sorts of things. The language in that ballot measure also spelled out very specifically what these dollars could be used for, and you see those up on your screen: by Health and Human Services, tobacco-related health issues, as well as addiction, substance abuse, education, and mitigation efforts. So we went live collecting these taxes on Aspen tobacco sales January 1st of 2018. After about a year and a half of collections, City Council at the time instructed staff to work with Aspen Family Connections to develop a program that would address known needs that were identified through community surveys, data analysis, and so on, that would best serve our community. In February of 2020, Aspen City Council entered into an MOU with the Aspen School District and Aspen Family Connections for an amount of up to $250,000 per year to provide these services. February of 2020 was an interesting time. We were hoping to launch all of these programs that Catherine is going to tell you a great deal about. Unfortunately, COVID-19 made its worldwide launch right about that same time. As such, Aspen Family Connections' main focus turned to meeting the critical needs of our community, providing food, money to pay bills, and those sorts of things for those who were hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic in our community. So we got off to a bit of a slow start and really didn't get programming up and running until the latter part of 2021. And that's where I'm going to hand things over to Catherine to talk to you about the extraordinary work that has been accomplished with these tobacco tax funds since its inception. Catherine?
Good. Well, thanks very much, CJ. And thanks very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. It's been a while. February 2019. Yes, the world has been a bit upended since then. But actually, everything that's happened has informed everything that's happened since for us in terms of our prevention work and the urgency or the importance of this work for families and children in our community. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk to you about it and to this new council. I'm not going to sort of belabor the underpinnings of the project, but I'm going to give you a little run through. But before I do that, I actually want to introduce some members of my team who are here, and they can wave at you. That's Erin Kinney. And Norma Canchola and Carolina Lozano, and they do the case management work, which is the kind of bread and butter, if you like, of Aspen Family Connections. And I think together they have served about 200 families with case management service, resource connecting to benefits, funding, mental health, you name it. That's the sort of day-to-day work of Aspen Family Connections.
And thank you.
Yeah, really, they deserve it.
You know,
They're incredibly
yes,
hardworking
you're in
and
jobs
dedicated
that don't always
people.
get thanks, and we want to recognize you and say thank you so much.
Yeah, they're awesome. And sitting there is Renee Giles, and she's actually, you'll hear a bit more about her. She was one of the people that we hired through this project. And the activity and the things I'm going to be talking about today would not have happened without the funding that came from the tobacco tax, and it's directly related to what I believe are the sort of fundamental goals of that tobacco tax. You know, when you take a bold move, like instituting a tax, which was very innovative at the time, that and the flavor ban, you know, Aspen was really a leader in the country at that point. You do so because you care about the well-being of children. And so when we formulated this project, it really was with that well-being at the heart. It's like, what can we do to create long-term success and shore up, if you like, the lives of children in our community, not just for now when they're here, but for when they go out into the world doing whatever it is they're going to do. So with that, I'll I'll arrow myself. There we go. So this is what the project is, in summary, what it was. You know, we wanted to get away from the idea that the schools have to solve everybody's problems, because that's not true. Schools do an enormous number of very important things, but schools aren't, it's not just about schools. And we have a lot of community here, so it's best practice, and I think it's thought to be, you know, just the way forward to combine schools, which obviously are very important, with the community to address substance misuse prevention. We wanted to look at Aspen, think about us. So it's not a generic program that we bought off the shelf. We're designing it to some degree as we go, but it really is about you know, what it's like growing up here with its own particular conditions. And then we wanted to emphasize collaboration. The last thing I wanted to do was to use this funding to kind of reinvent the wheel, duplicate, you know, get in the way of other people. So collaboration, as it turns out, is quite hard work, but we have unbelievable partners here, unbelievable organizations, nonprofits, government agencies, you name it, and everybody has, without exception, stepped up to support our work in this area. So it's a collaborative. You'll hear me boring on about that in the next few minutes. So I'm not going to rehearse this at length. You can read it for yourself. But basically, risk factors are many and varied. It's a kind of, life is a risk factor, you might say. But definitely, these are some of the key things we wanted to address. And some of these, I think, have been exacerbated by COVID. So there is a kind of COVID strand underlying our concerns about the lives of kids in this community and how they're going to shape up in the next few years. I've also added in red, because I feel passionately about it, the impact of social media on kids' lives. But all of these things, social anxiety, you know, academic failure, lack of attachment, permissiveness with regards to substance, resilience. You might just say resilience. That could be the one word I'd put up there. These things expose kids to risk, and risk of substance misuse, other mental health challenges in their lives, not necessarily during their childhood, but later in their lives too. And then we added some Aspen factors. I thought hard about putting these pictures on the screen, actually, but they appeared in the press in the last week or two. And I don't come at this, and none of us comes at this with judgment, right? We're not here to say people shouldn't drink, have fun, have a good time. But it is without question, and I speak as a parent who's had to navigate this, it is a factor of life in our town, and it's something that needs to be explained. You know, alcohol, marijuana, we have, 7 marijuana dispensaries in Aspen, and, you know, booze is ubiquitous. You get on a chairlift and you see an ad for vodka. So we do live in this world. We're not going to stop that. What we want to do is create citizens, young citizens, who have the skills to navigate that world and understand, you know, what the risks are to them and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what's legal, what's not legal. And, you know, these stress factors, I listed them here because we see them every day, literally every day. You know, there is, you know, I put income inequality because it is a risk factor. It is a risk factor. I spoke to a family this afternoon who are going to be leaving town because they can't afford to live here. And we know that, you know, times are tough for a lot of people. It is difficult living here, challenging for all kinds of reasons. And it's also wonderful. So I list those things because I think they play a part in our story. And the consultants that we've brought in to work with us on this project have, you know, clearly identified that. The first meetings that they have, they've met with they've had over 60 meetings, community meetings with different players, stakeholders. I think the words Hunter Thompson were mentioned about 55 times. I mean, it was incredible. People said, well, it's just part of life. And it probably is. But we just want our kids to be able to see a path through and understand, you know, what substance can do for them. All right, protective factors. These are all the things that we can do, and this, of course, is not an exhaustive list, but all the things that we can do to mitigate the risks that I've just talked about. So, you know, building resilience, and I've just picked some of them out. Parent education, substance use education, academic support, And, you know, this is a very much a community where a lot of people have a lot of things, but we know, and we know from COVID, and we know from the applications for financial assistance, and we know from the numbers at our food bank that there are lots of people here who aren't necessarily able to avail themselves of everything that Aspen has to offer, who can't afford, for example, a private tutor for their kids. So we wanted to look at all those gaps and think about how can we reinforce protective factors. And so how do we do that? Well, Anne Mullins, who she is here, was a big help for us at the beginning. We brought together loads of community partners, in fact, everyone we could think of, and in fact, everyone who asked to be involved to come and talk to us. And we created regular meetings to design the project. And it was revelatory, actually. It was those were some great those are great meetings. It's, you know, we don't often see the recreation department sitting down with, I don't know, the buddy program, or, you know, just everybody together talking about what can we do to reinforce the lives of children and families. So that's been a big part of it. And it's going to be, prevention is not, it's not a sort of neat equation, you know, but I think it's an ongoing conversation, as I say. And collaboration has been, I think, one of the most rewarding and revelatory aspects of this work. All right, so we brought in Sound Check Prevention Network. Tori, I think you may have met them at a certain point. They're amazing. I'm happy to talk more about them. In fact, they're going to be helping us produce a sort of rather more specific end-of-year report by the end of this year on their findings, on their many meetings. But they've been working in classrooms, mainly with middle and high schoolers. They've met with parents, they've met with community members, and they are providing really some rigor, I think, to the program. They're helping us develop a data analysis with Pitkin County Public Health, which I'll be able to share with City Council and with anyone who's interested. And it will tell an interesting story. I think you have to be very careful when it comes to data, so I didn't want to kind of come with shock horror figures, but it is, we know from, we've talked about vaping, we've talked about alcohol, we've talked about marijuana, that kids in Aspen are exposed to a lot, and they have higher use and a more permissive attitude to those things than their peers in other parts of the state and probably nationally as well. So, you know, that's not a shock, that's not new. It's been that way for years, and but it isn't really changing, and we have concerns around that. So we use Sound Check, and they're really wonderful.
I think I met with them.
You did.
Yeah, and they were great.
You did. Yeah, no, they're very thoughtful. They've been back about 5 times now, and they're really getting into the heads of this community. So as I say, it's not a sort of off-the-shelf approach. I wasn't interested in that. And then we hired 2 people, because as I say, collaboration, this kind of work is just about hard work. It's setting up meetings, it's having ideas, and then it's actualizing the project. So we hired Renee, who's sitting here, to work on early childhood, because those foundations are absolutely critical. And actually Megan Monahan is here from Kids First, and she's been an unbelievably awesome collaborator with all these efforts. So the city is a partner in so many respects. And Emily Cackett, who's not here because she's moving house today, to work with teens. And these are gaps that I've identified since I started Aspen Family Connections, is that these are places where we felt we could impact a ton of people with a ton of activity. So I was going to put all this stuff in a slide, and then I realized it was a lot, so I printed out basically a list of activities and photographs. And as I was doing it, I was kind of amazed, because really this is a year's work. Renee came on staff, I think, in April last year. Emily didn't start till June. So this is, in her case, it's not even a year of activity. And it's kind of a tsunami. It's absolutely amazing. We have held a large number of parent events, community events. We have created, clubs, resources, activities, all kinds of things that didn't exist a year ago. And it's all because of these 2 people and their tireless work. It's kind of it's actually kind of moving to me how much they've done. We also put some of the money into other people's projects. And those are listed here. We put some money into a wonderful project called Connect at Aspen Elementary School. They did social emotional learning and regulation and skill building for younger children for 15 weeks this year. We put some money into conscious discipline training, which was made available to the providers. So it's not just the kids, it's not just the families, but also the early childhood providers were given that. We've put money into a project which I'm so proud of. It's called Aspen Learning Lift with Aspen Learning and the Aspen Youth Center, who are incredible partners, so that any child who needs individual tutoring, these are for middle schoolers, can have it. That's amazing. I mean, when I first started at Aspen Family Connection, tutoring was the preserve of rich kids. And it makes a difference. It's a game changer. That's why everybody does it, right? It's not that teachers aren't great and school isn't great, but many children, including my own, benefited from extra after-school tuition. And yet that's not open to people. So we cracked that one, and it's to the point where kids actually come up to Emily at school and say, can I meet with a tutor? And it might just be to catch up on some homework. It might be to, you know, who knows, but that's an incredible project and great investment of tobacco tax funding. At the Aspen High School, they've set up a Hope Squad, which is a peer mentoring mental health group. It's phenomenal. It's a nationally recognized program. So again, we're not reinventing. And Aspen Kids Guide is going to be happening soon, thanks to Kids First and Renee's work. It's going to be an online resource guide for families, something that, again, doesn't exist right now, and that the tobacco tax has made possible. So next steps, well, yes, I had a feeling I might need to address that. My head's still spinning from this year. We are going to continue with working with SoundCheck. We're producing a logic model which is very robust. We're working with a woman who runs a company called EvalWorks, and her job is evaluating major projects related to public policy and education. So we want to create something that will endure, if you like. This will be the story of what this project's about and where it needs to go. As I said, we'll be producing data analysis. King County Public Health are helping us with that. And we're going to have sort of fairly robust recommendations for further things we need to do and where we need to slim down our efforts and where we need to expand them. And as I say, my 2 staff members have completed a year. Actually, no, that's not quite right. It's just about a year each of the 3-year program. We're hoping, because we started their hires late, that we're going to be able to extend them beyond 3 years. But obviously, I wouldn't be a normal person if I didn't say that I hope that the funding can continue in some form in future. We're not really here to discuss that today, but I'm there. I said it. So yeah, it's a lot, right? And I don't mean to. I hope it's not overwhelming. I tried to tell a coherent story, and I think it is. I think it's very valuable work. And as I say, I know that you all either have children, have been children, care about children, know children, but in this community we have an opportunity. And I always say this about Aspen, which is if we can't do things well here, I don't know where you can do things well, right? Because we have goodwill, resources, intelligent, committed people, and a small community. And I just look forward to, continuing this efforts. Is absolutely, I would say, the kind of work of my professional career, because it is inspiring. And the things they're doing, just going to a club fair so I don't mean to get sort of, mushy, but going to a club fair at the middle school that Emily organized basically on her own, and seeing a room full of kids excited about new things, and then going and joining a bike and ski tech club at the high school, and meeting new adults and learning new skills and feeling engaged is it's been just like one rewarding thing after the other. So I think I'm very lucky to be doing it. Sorry to blur, as I've been holding it in for several years. So.
No apology. Thank you. Do you have more?
Done.
Okay. Before I ask if there's other questions for you, CJ, did you have any input or information you wanted to share with us about this?
Nope, I really wanted to just provide the stage tonight for Catherine to expand and tell the story that she just told about the incredible work that's been made possible by the tobacco tax that we have here locally. So no other additional information from me. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those, but that was it.
Are there other funding partners for Aspen Family Connections?
Well, this money just funds this project. So Aspen Family Connections and my team and myself, we are funded by other grants and separate fundraising. And we've been really careful to keep those things discreet. It's not muddied. There are 2 staff members, there's sound check, and there's a bunch of projects that we've been supporting. But that's nothing to do with, that doesn't pay our salaries. I have to raise that money elsewhere.
What have we seen for the tobacco tax revenues? Are they level, rising, or dropping?
They're fairly steady. We had an initial high year, our first year in 2018, we collected 402,000. We have a low point of 304,000, I believe, but we're averaging right around $350,000 over the last 5 years.
How does that compare to pre-tax dollars? So pre-implementation of the tax?
As far as
I know you didn't have a tax, but how are the sales?
the sales of those, I can't answer that question for you right here. I can get that from finance.
The reason I ask, and sorry to hijack your question, Tori, is it an effective deterrent or not?
Right. That is the question. It is. To what degree, we don't know. But more importantly than that, I think we've also done the flavor bans. And so there are literally things that have been taken off the shelf, so are not being acquired here at least. So, I mean, yeah, there is, but we'll see if we can get more information about what we're seeing. I think there's been an impact, but I don't think it's.
I think the tax and obviously the people who proposed it, and Pitkin County Public Health were great leaders in that, wouldn't have suggested it if there wasn't a sort of an evidence base for deterrence. I think it's quite interesting that today Australia banned what they call recreational vaping, meaning that you'll be able to vape. Now that's major. That's a huge thing.
Well, as opposed to the medicinal vaping.
Well, because vaping, there is a legitimate, for people who want to give up cigarettes, right? And that's how it was always marketed. The difficulty, as we've seen, is that when it comes to vaping, the amount of nicotine that you receive through the vaping device is extraordinarily, many, many times more than you would from smoking a cigarette. So in fact, although it was marketed as a way of, reducing your dependence, it increases addiction. And it's amazing how many young people in our community are addicted to vape, because it's a powerful amount of nicotine, and I can give you figures on that. We did a whole vaping night, and it's pretty sobering. The good news is that in this community, as nationally, vaping is declining. Vaping use amongst young people is declining. It's still high. We're still high, but it's not what it was. So I feel as though there is a deterrent. It's not like I said, these are not simple equations, Bill. So the long-term impact is really what you're looking for.
And then I wanted to ask you a quick question about the Kids Guide. Is that what it was called, the Kids Guide?
Yes.
Right? So it was just mentioned in one of your slides, and then you were talking about a Kids Guide that is going to be an available resource for families to find out what's maybe available and going on in our community for kids and families and teens and such?
Camps, resources, services, events, the lot, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
We're trying, what Kids First and.
They can't hear you.
Come on up.
Come on.
Thanks, Janae.
No worries.
Come sit next to me.
Okay. Have a hot flash, but we'll get over that. Okay. So basically what we've done is collaborated together with Kids First. We applied for a CB2 grant that would allow us to create a family hub, so a family website that was specific to 0
to, I guess, we were specifically looking at early childhood. It's kind of grown. So it's going to be for young families in the valley now and also visiting. We will be targeting Pitkin County, but it will extend to the valley. What we're looking at is resources for families, for teachers. What we've noticed is that we didn't have that connection between new families, resources, Medicaid waivers, education, being able to get a babysitter, being able to get affordable childcare, having the resources to tap into funding for these. So that's what the community basically has asked us for. We did a lot of looking into that. We
6 focus groups.
yeah, we did 6 different focus groups. We talked to a lot of different people, and that's what we found. We found that we had a big gap that was missing in our community for resources and access to resources for young families and young children. So we created a website.
Well, I think that's great. I just wanted to get a little bit more information, so thanks for sharing that. You know, I'm a firm believer that this community is so geared towards our adult population that our teens, our kids, and families are in need of a lot of support. And so I'm glad that that guide and that resource is being developed, and I would want to support you going forward. You know, my conversations have been, whether it's with city staff, from events for families to ACRA and their interest in events for families, things like that. So I just want more information. I appreciate it.
And all of that will be coming together. We're starting beta testing in June. We have the outlook of it all, and once we complete the beta testing, we are reaching out to all of our community partners, and that's what we want. We want a central hub where you can access all of this information.
Thank you for that.
No worries.
Those are my questions. I'll look to other council members. I'll start down with you, Sam. Anything?
No questions, just love the work that Aspen Family Connections does. Every time, you know, you see despair in the world, you always look for the people helping, so it's really wonderful to see what you guys do always.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
I just want to say this seems like money very well spent. Thanks for the hard work, and I just really like the fact that we're taking tax from tobacco users and spending it on mental health for the rest of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lisa, any follow-up, Bill?
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, thank you. Great work that you're doing. Secondly, bravo. What you've accomplished in a short amount of time is really commendable. A couple just sort of thoughts and anecdotes. One is I want to make sure the money continues to be spent on prevention of tobacco use and vaping use, which I know is part of your program, but I think we need to remember where the money's coming from and what it should be going towards. And one personal anecdote, for whatever it's worth, I'm far from an expert on how to implement that, but I'll never forget that there was an exhibit, a special event exhibit called Bodies that you may have heard of. And I will never forget seeing preserved lungs, healthy lungs, and smokers' lungs next to one another. For me, that was it.
That was your
I would
prevention,
never
right?
touch a cigarette again after seeing that. I think I saw it as a teenager, and it was very, very powerful, and I'll never forget that. So one idea, I'm far from an expert on that, but I think prevention on this is key, and if we're going to tax that, let's make sure that we're doing it and putting the money back to prevent the use of it. And then secondly, I want to make sure that we are, especially as it relates to the kids' efforts, that we're doing it outside of the Aspen School District in addition to inside of the Aspen School District in the other schools in our community. So that's important to me.
100%. Yeah. And no schools. I mean, yeah, everything.
Yeah,
That was
there are
that's
probably
always our goal.
homeschooled kids here in Aspen too, so
Absolutely, yeah. No, we're very conscious of that. Thank you.
thanks for all.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for deluging you, but
No
anyway,
apologies here. Thank you.
I'm very, very pleased to have had the opportunity. Thanks ever so much.
Appreciate it.
Catherine.
All right, we'll move on our agenda. We still have a couple items left to go here. Next one is a funding request.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Is it okay if I share my screen? All righty. Thank you so much. I wanted to just briefly give you an update about where we are with this. So the funding requests for response and the funding requests that we have from Lift Up are both requests for tobacco dollars. And as CJ mentioned earlier, the funding the tobacco tax dollars are collected for financing the health and human services in addition to the tobacco-related health issues and addiction and substance abuse in education and mitigation. The city has just a little more than $500,000 in uncommitted fund balance in the city's tobacco tax dollars. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Meyer, the Executive Director for Response.
Thanks for letting us speak tonight. I'd also like to introduce Braulio Jerez from the Aspen Police Department, who is a board member of Response.
I am.
Glad to have him sitting up here and helping me answer questions from you guys tonight. So, as Jen said, my name's Shannon Meyer. I'm the Director of Response. Response is the only organization in the Upper Roaring Fork Valley serving survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, stalking, and human trafficking. We provide an array of services for survivors in our community. We have a 24-hour crisis line, as Sam is familiar with. He's one of our volunteers. Thank you, Sam. We do crisis intervention and individualized advocacy with survivors. That includes court and medical accompaniment, financial assistance, housing assistance, which we will talk about at length here, and referrals to other community services, as well as providing therapy and support groups. In addition to our work directly with survivors, the other part of our mission is to work with the community to end domestic and sexual abuse, and we do presentations in all of our schools, middle schools and high schools, from Basalt to Aspen. We usually have about 1,600 student presentation hours each year, teaching them about healthy relationships, sexual consent, bystander intervention, teen dating violence. Of course, with younger grades, we talk about healthy relationships in terms of healthy friendships, and then we move up in an age-appropriate manner. So I wanted to just go to the next slide, please. Just in general, the statistics around domestic abuse, because so many, am I not close enough? He's giving me a look. Okay. I often hear from people that they imagine that domestic violence doesn't happen in our community. The facts are that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men will experience some form of domestic abuse in their lifetime, and the same holds true in our community. 50% of all women and men will experience psychological aggression from an intimate partner. And then moving towards the housing side of the spectrum, the fear of losing safe and affordable housing is one of the top reasons that a victim won't leave their abuser. And domestic violence is one of the leading causes of homelessness for women and children. Because we're going to be talking about funding, next slide, please. I could reach over and go tap. I wanted to just briefly touch on some of the economic costs of domestic abuse, which are really often ununderstood and overlooked. The 2016, there was a study that found that the per victim lifetime cost of domestic abuse was close to $82,000, or nationally equal to $3.6 trillion. And you can see on the slide, I don't need to repeat it all, where those costs come from. And then at the bottom, the estimate that 1.3 of those costs are borne by government sources, such as cities and municipalities, states, and federal government. On the other side of the slide, we'll talk about the children's exposure to domestic violence. There's a reason that witnessing domestic abuse in a home is considered child abuse. The long-term consequences for a child just to see that happen in their home is intense. It can carry impacts on their psychological health, their physical health, of course, their success in school, and the likelihood that they will become an offender themselves later on in life. Also carries a total overall cost of $55 billion nationwide per an annual cohort of young adults. Next slide, please. So what has Response been doing in our community? Last year, we worked with 171 survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. And according to our numbers, 56% of our clients live in Pitkin and Aspen. I'm not able to provide really specific numbers because part of the work with domestic survivors is not putting a lot of burdens of reporting on them. So we do not require that people tell us where they live, where they work, where the abuse happened. We usually gather that data, but all the numbers we have, we extrapolate the reported residents of Pitkin County, the reported residents of Aspen to our total numbers. So that's where that 56 comes from. Last year, we answered over 300 calls to our 24-hour crisis helpline. And we helped 76 survivors and 62 children with one or more forms of housing assistance. So our housing program, which started in 2019, has 3 tiers. The first is emergency shelter, which we provide in local hotels that generously donate to us. That's only 3 nights of stay if someone is in imminent danger. For a long time, that's all we had to offer, which is really less than a Band-Aid, right? It's if the police call us in the middle of the night, there's been an incident, the perpetrator is on the loose, it's not safe for the victim to stay in their home, we can put them in a hotel. But after 3 nights, where are they gonna go? They usually would have to go back to their abuser if they didn't have the option to go live with family or friends, or they might leave the valley and we lose a community member and an employee in our local businesses. I started the housing program to meet that need, and to our emergency shelter offerings, we added short-term transitional housing and long-term rental assistance. So at that time, we started providing this short-term housing, which is up to 3 months while people get back on their feet, figure out where they're gonna move into next, in apartments that Response rented around the valley. We started with 1. 6 months later, we needed to add another. 6 months later, we needed to add a third. The demand was there and it was intense. I'll come back to that in a second, but the third tier is long-term rental assistance, and that's really flexible funding to help that person who is moving into their own independent living situation or maybe having to afford rent by themselves once the perpetrator is left and they're struggling to make ends meet. We help them with money over time, reducing it down so that, a maximum we would give out per client would be $6,000. And we've had to increase that amount over the last couple of years as we've seen rents skyrocket. So that middle piece, that transitional housing that I was explaining in our apartments, last year we provided 17 survivors and 17 children with stays in those. Our average stay was 1.6 months, but at the same time we had to turn away 13 survivors for lack of space. So when we at Response have a waiting list for transitional housing, that doesn't mean that someone is staying in a happy home. It means that generally they're staying with their abuser, waiting to strategize their departure from that relationship till when they can move into a safe place. So it's truly heartbreaking for us to know that we had to turn 13 people away. So last July, looking at those numbers, I went to the board of directors and said, I think it's time for us to build a shelter. That has been something that's been in our minds for a long time, but we really wanted to do some proof of concept with our housing program and show that there was a demand. We proved that. To show that we had the ability to do it, we've hired a housing program manager. She's got a very robust program working with survivors through this program, and we felt we were ready. Almost immediately, we found what we consider to be the perfect plot of land in Basalt on which to build the shelter. We were looking for some place that would be, and you can go to the next one, close to community services, close to a bus line. A lot of times, survivors go into shelter with no car, so being close to the bus line is pretty important. So this piece of land, this is a rendering of the building we will be building, is at the end of the cul-de-sac next to Iberian Rug in Basalt, if you turn in at the Park and Ride there. So 200 yards from the Park and Ride, a short walk from the high school, right across the highway from the middle school and the elementary school. So a very ideal location. It's in 325 Cody Lane. Before we went into closing on the property, we got approval from the town of Basalt to have our use there. Of course, it's a commercial area and our use is mixed. It's not strictly residential and it's not strictly commercial. So the town of Basalt approves our use a domestic abuse center there. We closed, and now we're in the middle of the site plan review process. We just got approval of our plans, like our specific this building on that land. From P&Z, we got approval 2 weeks ago, and we're going in front of town council in 2 more weeks to get through that process. Our hope is that we will then get to full permits by early fall and break ground in October if we've raised all the money. I'm going to go to the next slide and tell you a little bit about what's inside this building. This is going to be a public-facing shelter. So I'm telling you the address, I'm telling you where it's located because it's not a secret. And I know that most people are familiar with the old model of a confidential safe house. And that really made sense when survivors were not going to work and their kids weren't going to school. They were going into shelter until he was found and put in jail or they could move out of the area. They weren't going to and from work and school. That's not the case anymore, anywhere in this country. All the domestic abuse centers that are building new shelters at this point are looking at public-facing models. A couple reasons for that. One, it's just not practical to try to keep something confidential. There's tracking devices that get put on cars all the time, your phones, you can be followed. It's impossible in a community like ours to do anything without everybody knowing. You know, the moment we pulled a building permit, people would know what we were doing. So instead, you turn the model outwards and say, this is where response is, this is where survivors can come for help. And to do that, we're co-locating our office with the shelter. That way, the community is both part of sort of destigmatizing our use there and also keeping it safe. Like local law enforcement is very aware of what we're doing there, and we design a building with security in mind. So on the bottom, you'll see the main level there. The yellows and the pinks are office spaces. We have a conference room. We have 5 meeting rooms for meeting with clients and for staff to office in. We have a food and clothing pantry for survivors. And then there's only 2 entrances to the building to keep it safe. So they're both keypad access, video cameras. All the rooms have panic buttons that can directly go to law enforcement. To the right, as you look at it, is a business center in the first room in the shelter there. The shelter itself will have 7 efficiency units. So it's a very trauma-informed model in that survivors living there will have all they need to contain themselves and their kids. The efficiency units are similar to like a long-term hotel stay, like a Residence Inn kind of model. They've got their own bathroom, a kitchenette. There's 5 family suites that have 4 beds in them, so 1 survivor and 3 kids. And then we have 2 adult survivor rooms that ideally would have 1 adult survivor in it. At capacity, we could put 2 unrelated survivors together, or they can be added on. You'll see that there's a door that could go between those and the family rooms if there was a larger family. There's also communal kitchen, so that part of the therapeutic aspect of being in shelter is being able to connect with other survivors and share stories. So the kitchen area has 2 separate cooking and food prep areas, and then there's a communal place where people can have their meals together. The room that sticks out at the bottom there is actually an employee dwelling unit that's above the carport. And that way we can have a response staff person on site to keep eyes on the property, whether that's a part-time person who works on our crisis line or one of our full-time staff. If at some point we don't have an employee who's interested in living there, that can be another living unit for a survivor. There's also on the first floor a fenced-in play yard so we can keep the children safe and out of view. And then the whole site itself has some outdoor space. We're going to have a peace garden there where people can go, whether they're staying in shelter or visiting their response advocate just in the office side of the building. So this is the budget for the whole property. You'll see we already bought the land for $1.2 million, and then those are construction costs, planning, and campaign costs. And you can go to the next one. This is our expected sources of income. We received a lead gift right as we closed on the property from the Diane and Bruce Holly Foundation for $2.25 million, and that is why the building is named the Holly Center for Hope and Healing after them. We have a very large, as you'll see, request into a new grant program at the Division of Housing. We were hoping we would have heard back from them in March, but they have been inundated with applications. We're super glad we got in on the first round because they shut it off after that. And then other foundations, you'll see the municipal funding. We'll dig into that a little bit more on the next slide. And then people within our community. So we are very close to $3 million raised already, having just launched the campaign officially in February. Next slide. So these are we're asking for a total of $500,000 from all the municipalities that we service. We have a request into Pitkin County for $250,000. This request to you through the tobacco tax funding for $150,000. The town of Basalt will probably fulfill that request by waiver of permit fees. Town of Snowmass Village has actually already awarded us a $30,000 grant from their tobacco tax dollars, and then an ask to Eagle County. I will say that we've asked Garfield County and they've turned us down. I'm sure nobody's particularly surprised by that, but we will keep pursuing that through other avenues. And
I'm a little surprised. Could you explain why they turned you down?
well, our service area is Western Eagle and Pitkin County. There's Advocate Safe House Project, which serves Garfield County. So we serve survivors that live and or work in the Upper Valley. And we're finding, of course, that more and more of our survivors that that work in the Upper Valley live in Garfield County, to the point where I think about 20% of our clients live in Garfield County.
So you don't turn them away because
No.
you don't serve?
As long as they have a connection to our service area. And we also serve people who are visitors. That's a much smaller percentage, but. And I think there was one fact that I missed, which was if we looked at the 56% of our clients living in Pitkin and Aspen and multiplied that times the per survivor economic cost of $81,000, almost $82,000, would be an estimate that responses services are covering the $3.1 million to some extent of that cost to a community. If you could just put us back on slide 5, that's the pretty picture of the building that we can have up while I'm open for any questions.
Well done. Before I get to questions, Diane, I guess I should turn to you. Requests like these, or this, I should say, these, because there's 2 of them coming, are out of process, out of our normal process of grant funding. This is a request of tobacco tax dollars. In our packet, you've supplied us with the information about our balance in the tobacco tax. But have we had any conversations about long-range strategy? So for me, requests of $150,000 or $100,000 coming out of an account makes me wonder, yeah, but what else does that impact? Have we had long-range discussions? And you know, how do I contextualize this request in light of a budget?
I'll give you 2 things and then I'll hand it over to Jen. The first one is Sarah knows a lot more about the tobacco tax and has a lot more history than I do. The second piece I do know is that this is something that we've wanted to get out to the community, and we do feel like we need to push dollars through. Okay. And for the right, this is not for any request. These are for things that from a staff perspective, we're presenting as community benefit. Thank you. Jen?
I would say that our existing funding programs don't fund capital requests. I know that could be a process that the grants folks would maybe entertain if there were some criteria that, just the way that the rest of the grant programs that we have evaluate these requests, at one time, and can look at whether these are the first dollars in or the last dollars in, whether or not they're the capital requests will result in whatever it is actually being built. So I know that there's some interest there. the tobacco taxes, someone mentioned the idea is for smoking cessation. So hopefully, at some point, these dollars go away, because we will have impacted smoking. I hope that that someday is true, but I think this is a one-time request. These are one-time kind of dollars that are sitting in a fund balance. But certainly, we can discuss what it looks like to have a program, and would be happy to bring back something at a future date related to that.
I don't want to put that on the table right now, but we'll talk about that. I just, we even, a couple months ago, we got a request for $1,000 for a film at Pepke, and I was like, I got a ton of questions, so whether it's 1,000 or 150,000, I just am about how requests come to us and how we allocate and how we do that with the context of our budget. So it's difficult. Second to that, I would say, since we do have another request coming, maybe we should hear both of them before council members want to weigh in on either of them. But we'll wait and find out in just a minute. That's all of my questions right now. I'll start with Bill. Bill, questions, comments, suggestions?
Yeah, my question, I guess, is not specific to either of these proposals, but do we have the legal authority to spend this money outside of the city limits, outside of the county? Is there any sort of guardrails on what we need to do there?
There's no restriction on the jurisdictional boundaries. The authority in the tax was relatively broad, including Health and Human Services. But there's no jurisdictional limits on where you spend those monies. It just has to fit within the purposes of the tax, which this does.
And the property is actually in Pitkin County, town of Basalt, Pitkin County, not Eagle County.
Great. Thanks for all the great work you do.
John, questions? Comments?
No questions. I think this would be money well spent. I am eager to hear more about the lift up request, but just to learn that 13 people were turned away is disturbing to me, and I think that this is something we need as our valley grows.
Sam, any questions, comments, suggestions?
Just a question for staff real quick of, to your point, there's going to be $324,850.09 left if we grant these two requests, and will those just sit in the bank account waiting for other requests? Is that just essentially, yeah, okay. All right, and there's no other requests at this time other than these two? No. All right, and then for here.
But no, it doesn't just sit there and wait for requests. This council has the ability to activate those funds.
Okay.
So, no, it's not just dormant money. This is stuff that we have purview over to allocate. And the reason I say that and the reason I bring it up right now is because that's what I'm talking about is, yeah, we have this money, but what do we want to do with it? Newly elected, you bring new ideas and new thoughts to the table about how, so we haven't had those discussions, and that's why I say, like, yeah, when it comes to budgeting, yeah, it's great to say, oh, well, after this, there'll be this much left. But, I mean, there's need in our community, so, anyway, you understand what I'm saying.
I do, and I thank you for that, and I mean, the only reason I asked that is just like, why would anyone say no sort of questions? Because, I mean, I do hotline advocacy, I understand the work Response does, it's incredible, and the people that are helped, they really need it, and it's really incredible stuff. So the only question I really had was just how you came up with the $150,000 number for the city of Aspen.
We just really tried to look at numbers percentage-wise. I think that it's 30% of our municipal ask is what we're asking of you guys, and the client numbers are pretty close to that. I think it's about 26%, looking at last year. Yeah.
Have you had any indications from Pitkin County?
They're very interested in trying to help us get money from the general fund and potentially from the energy impact fees. But it's moving more slowly than you guys are. Okay. And interestingly, the folks at DOLA, who administer the Division of Housing Grant, they keep asking, what have you heard? What have you heard? So even though they're our biggest ask, they kind of want to be last in. And of course, so many foundations and donors want to be last in. They want to make sure it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it is. You're on your way. You're on your way. Okay, thank you so much. If council's okay, we'll hear the next one as well, and then we'll talk,
Good with me.
just for context. Is that all right? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We will come back to that, but next up on our agenda is for the lift-up request, also a capital request.
Good day, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Sheila Mauer. I'm with the Adjournment.
Thank you.
And this is Debbie Jackson. He's our executive director at Lease. This is your list of opportunities.
Nice to meet you.
And I know you've heard a lot of presentations today, so thanks for making time for us and all the good work everyone does here. So this is our capital campaign presentation is in regards to Glenwood Springs Food Distribution Center. As you know, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of history. Lift Up's been around for over 41 years, and in 2021, the board of directors hired a consultant to help restructure the organization. And he was hired our current executive director, and they created our 3-year strategic plan. And since then, they've been working really hard to meet a lot of objectives. And if you haven't been to one of our pantries lately, you might enjoy a quick visit to the Aspen Pantry and its new location at the Pickens County Human Services Building. I'd be happy to take you on the tour if you want to go. One of our goals is that each pantry looks and feels more like a market than a food pantry. Stocked full with shelf-stable food, as well as a variety of fresh produce, meat, and dairy selections from local farmers. And you'll see clean shelving, freezers, and refrigerators with clear doors. Our mission at Lift Up is to be the leader in providing equitable food security for individuals and families, educating and building understanding and support to end hunger from Parachute to Aspen. Our purpose is that we believe access to fresh, healthy, and sustainable food provides hope and empowerment. That's okay. Thank you. Strengthening our community. The goals from our strategic plan are an inclusive, equitable, and accessible food distribution experience for our guests, healthy, nutritious, and participant-centered food resources for anyone in need. That's better. Effective, efficient, and sustainable operations, safe, sustainable, and regionally sourced food supply, community awareness of regional food insecurity, and the resources to respond. So if you're not aware of our programs already, we have service delivery from Parachute to Aspen. We have 6 food pantries located in Parachute, Rifle, Newcastle, Glenwood, Carbondale, and Aspen. We have 9 drive-through locations located in Parachute, Rifle, Silt, Newcastle, Glenwood, Carbondale, Elgeville, and Snowmass. And other programs include our Meal Monkey program for children, Extended Table, we have senior boxes, TFAP program, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and 72-hour emergency food bags. We are located in the Pickens County Human Services Building here in Aspen, and our drive-through distribution is currently at the Brush Creek parking lot in Snowmass. And that distribution service started in July of 2022. So recently, we're experiencing a significant increase in demand through our pantries and drive-through services. Altogether, in 2022, we saw guest visits to over 48,000 guests. And already in the first quarter, we've had over 25,000 visits.
Wow.
So it's pretty
That's a
remarkable.
wow.
Yeah, it's a 40% increase.
It's a 40% increase, and we were kind of, I wasn't sure to be happy about seeing the results or sad to just be so heartbroken that many people needed us. But after visiting with like Food Bank of the Rockies and similar programs, they're at the same percentage, so it's just very sad. 8% of our total guests use the Pickens County Pantry, And Pickens County served 727 guest visits, representing about 1,500 individuals served in Q1 of 2023. And this was actually a 91% increase from 2022. So, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but let's say there was 129 people in January of 2022, and there was over 250 in 2023, so.
You're doing too good of a job.
Right?
Congrats.
We're really proud of what we do.
Yeah, thank you.
The bottom line is the need is just increasing, right? And no one should go hungry in our area. So, because of all these things, we're here today to share with you our capital campaign project. We hope that you'll see the need and share in our passion as much as we do, sorry. We feel that your support is vital to the beginning stages of our campaign. And if you can look at the map, I'll show you here. We're looking to purchase a building in Glenwood Springs. It's central to the areas that we serve. It has easy access to I-70 and Highway 82. The building essentially is a large warehouse. It'll give us a large pantry space and different administrative offices. So, the goals of our campaign are obviously to purchase this, we're calling it the Glenwood Springs facility. So by operating 2 warehouses, these distribution models provide a more consistent service delivery to all guests and offer additional support due to unforeseen circumstances such as weather and road closures. Unfortunately, we have had to cancel services due to these things, as I'm sure you can all understand. Another goal is that it'll improve the efficiency of our distribution model, reducing transportation costs, reducing time for our staff on the roads, decreasing our carbon footprint, and increasing efficiency of staff resources. We'll increase our total warehouse capacity to hold a minimum of 180 days of shelf-stable food. We currently hold 90 days in our parachute warehouse, so we're so excited to be able to have so much more. We'll be able to open an improved pantry to better serve our guests. The pantry space in the new building will be 1,000 square feet. Our current pantry in Glenwood is about 400 square feet, so we're excited to be able to double that. It also allowed to increase storage of locally sourced fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, and dairy, and increase refrigeration and frozen storage capacity. We did a feasibility study, and what a lot of our partners, I just gave you a brochure on our Farm to Food Pantry program. So if you didn't know already, we work with 23 local farms and ranches, and we purchase all of our fresh fruit and vegetables from local farmers. And we asked them what they would need and how we could support them in this collaboration. And they said storage was one of the things. And that includes dry storage as well as cold and frozen storage, as well as a production kitchen, which is on the next section here. So that's part of the other goals. But the, I guess, part that we're excited about in regards to that part of the capital campaign is that those would actually help create a revenue stream, right? So we can become more sustainable. So we can lease those storage spaces to our farmers, and we can lease out the production kitchen. So what they said is that essentially they don't have a lot of space on their farms. So we'll be able to provide them with that space. The production kitchen will be able to provide them with an area to create value-added products. And then we would be able to give those products to our guests, but they would also be able to resell those products to create, additional revenue for themselves. And then gleaning becomes an enhanced value and helps to reduce the waste. We would also be able to offer educational workshops. We currently work with Healthy Matters and to create cooking classes, and we would be able to work with other organizations to do that. And then we would have the opportunity to open another thrift store. Our budget right now, the facility purchase is $1.7 million, and we know there'll be other costs, so our current budget right now is about $2 million. And our timeline really just kind of kicked off. So Garfield County, we did a presentation in Garfield County in early April, and we were awarded $100,000 from them. And we are working with all of our high net worth donors. We have about 73% of our unearned income. We think we'll be able to get about $1 million from our donors. So we're, we know that by asking you guys for, this gift, that it'll just help in our, sorry, I'm super nervous.
Don't be nervous. You do
It'll
great
just
work.
help
We
in
appreciate it.
asking for, other grants and municipal organizations. Let's go to the fun part. So let's look at the pictures. So the building is in West Glenwood. It's at 100 Midland Avenue, and it is currently, obviously, it's been available for a little while. So we would have suites 150, 170, and 270 ideally. And this is a picture of what the first floor looks like right now. You could tell it's a beautiful construction company, but the pantry would be on the left-hand side, about 1,000 square feet for the pantry. There's a lot of parking for guests, and there would be admin offices in this building as well. What I like about that is that we can have kind of admin offices where staff can just pop in, and it's not necessarily their office, if you will, but it'll save them time driving from the different warehouses. And this is a drawing from the people that did the feasibility study to help kind of take a look at what it would look like. Okay, the second floor of the warehouse is 9,000 square feet. Our current warehouse in Parachute is about 4,000. So this would just be, it would provide us with a lot of room. We'd be able to have a lot of shelf-stable food. We'd be able to have a lot of cold storage for fresh and nutritious food, as well as all the added value items that we'd like to do that would help create sustainable revenue to help pay for the building. Okay, so we're here today to ask for $50,000. As I said before, and I stumbled, having your support will increase our position when seeking funding from potential private donors and government entities and grant prospects. And we appreciate your partnership and consideration. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'll start down with Sam. Sam, any questions?
I'm not sure if I saw it in the slides. I was just wondering if you're getting money from other municipalities as well, or if you've asked so far.
Absolutely. Our largest ask, and you're actually our second ask, in regards to municipality, we have a list of about 10 different grantors and local banks and partnerships, as well as our top donors. We actually are really lucky to have a lot of individuals that really believe in our mission. So about 73% of our unearned income comes from 10% of our donors. So we're hoping and praying that we get about $1 million from them.
No, that's amazing. And then the 50,000 number, how was that come up with for the city?
That's a great question. I mean, really just kind of a percentage of individuals served in our
Okay.
area.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Sam.
Another math-based solution.
John?
I'm all for it. I think this is money well spent, once again. I think that's all I need to say.
Thanks so much for that. Bill?
Thanks for all that you do. I appreciate it. I believe in Lift Up, and have supported you, continue to support you through one of my businesses. I would ask, how did you decide to purchase a building? Did you do an analysis versus renting? What led to that decision?
We actually set about, if you can bear with me while I provide the story, Lift Up has one warehouse and it's currently in Parachute. And from here to, Parachute's about 80, 85 miles, something of that nature. So we were driving up and down the valley on a consistent basis, which is not cost effective and not productive. So we started looking for a facility that we could potentially lease or buy. The first building that we came across was actually one in Carbondale. It was the old city market. That's 45,000 square feet. And we started when, excuse me, when Sheila mentioned we entered into a feasibility study, we did that with Pitkin County because they're looking at doing an EMA project. I'm sure you are aware of that facility. And we also considered the the facility in Carbondale, the city market. That building was unfortunately not able to exist. The owners didn't want to do anything with it, so we looked elsewhere, and we found that it was going to be more cost effective to purchase a building, and Glenwood being a little cheaper than it is this down end of the valley. We saw something else in Carbondale that was $4 million for a smaller size, and so we ultimately found this, and so we choose to look to purchase it. But the biggest reason why we're looking at this particular facility is the way that we're able to get access for Bank of the Rockies trucks coming in, because you need a semi-truck to get access in there. It's centrally located, so we can go both ways, and it's the most cost-effective method that we have found to put forward over the next 20 years.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. I have, I guess, kind of the same question for both of you, which is, you know, when the city does something like this, we, I believe, we don't necessarily write a check tomorrow. We wait till the funding process goes on. We wait till you get to your goal. We commit, I guess I would say, before we put ink on a check. Is your business plan and your strategy have sustainable markers in it? Meaning, purchasing a building is one thing, operating it and keeping it going is another. So, how do you feel? What's your business plan, game plan, so that we know that whatever monies we're giving to you are going to this cause, going to be effective, and going to stay with this cause?
So we currently operate one thrift store, and that's about 1,500 square feet, in which we earn about $150 per square foot. We're getting a second thrift store, which is going to be about 2,500 square feet. And so if you do the math on that, that's about $350,000 gross income. That would cover the mortgage of the property that we're looking to purchase, as well as cover the running costs of the thrift store.
Thank you for that. I'd give you the same question. You know, you're already in land use process. You're a little further down the line with development proposals. So how is your business plan? How do you feel about it? You've got a larger elephant to bite, chew, but what's your long-term strategy for sustainability of this facility?
So there's two parts to that, as I hear you. We do have strong confidence in our ability to raise the $7.7 million based on the feasibility study that we did. We're hoping to get it done by September. I'm not sure that that will be feasible with our DOH request. If that's successful, it definitely will be. The second part of the question is in terms of long-term sustainability. In our current budget, we run about an $850,000 budget per year. About 50% of our funding comes from government sources, about 35% from private foundations, and the rest a combination of business, individuals from the community, and events. Our current model of providing transitional housing through rented apartments is an expensive model. And in fact, we're predicting that running the shelter will cost us about $100,000 a year. We're currently spending about $70,000 a year on the transitional housing. So we'll have more than twice as much housing for only a 30% or $30,000 increase to our annual operating. So we feel really confident in raising that. Our campaign is also bringing new donors to Response that we haven't approached before, haven't been connected to before, that are very excited about something like this, and studies show that people that contribute to a capital campaign stay with you for operating donations into the future.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Council members, what we would do here is direct Diane to bring us back a resolution for these. So I'm going to just ask you now, would you like us to have a resolution brought back on both of these requests?
Yes, from me.
I support both.
Yes, although I think it doesn't need to be beforehand. It could be after the fact. We should have some kind of strategy discussion on how we're going to allocate these funds moving forward.
Okay.
To your point.
And we should probably add that to some of our retreat topics, perhaps, so. All right, with that, there is support for bringing back resolution for both of your requests. They will come back to a regularly scheduled meeting where we can vote on them as a whole council.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your time.
Thank you guys very much.
Really appreciate your time, gentlemen. Thank you.
That'll bring us to our last item on our agenda this evening. If council members need to take a quick break and stretch their legs, or a bio break as they are called these days, the modern world.
So?
Can go ahead and do so, and we'll get switched over to our grants program update.
I've never heard that term, bio break.
Yeah, that's a first.
No, that's it now. That's how people are, they're PC even with P.
You're so woke, Tori. Didn't know there was an alternative to P.
Yeah, there's, however you get it out, maybe sweat it, I don't know.
No testimony yet?
I don't even think they've started.
Jen's been watching. Okay.
Yeah.
She just stepped off for start.
Yeah, she's been watching it. I don't think they're even started yet. Yeah.
What's this on the House bill still?
Yeah, 213 is going through the Senate today, and 1255, no, backwards, 1255 is going through the Senate, and 213 is going through the House.
Sometimes this transcript says crazy stuff.
But I'm testifying on 1255.
John, were you in ComDev once upon a time, or?
Was in ComDev once upon a time. Good memory.
All right, let's go ahead and.
All right, and we've got, and you want to come up here?
Would you like to join?
Come
Yes,
on up.
please. We can't do it without you.
It says, hey, doctor, come on.
Forgot to wear my blue-gray.
Oh, yeah, you didn't
Get the memo.
it's muted tones.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to get?
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Out of order here. Just FYI for you guys. It always takes a long time to get things done, at the council table, get things moving. But it's really gratifying as I just watched those last two requests, which are fabulous. We fought so hard, first to ban the flavors, to get the tobacco tax, to get all that done within a couple of years. And it's just nice to see what's being accomplished with what we did, how many years ago? 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Or so.
Yeah.
It was actually fun to see that tonight and think, oh, we did do something really great. So, and I'm sure you guys will do the same thing. It just, you don't see the results that quickly. It takes a while. So.
Thank you for that perspective, Ann.
Yeah, that is a valuable perspective.
All right, well, for those of you I haven't met, my name's John Barker. I'm a senior strategy consultant with the Strategy and Innovation Office. And I'm joined by Alyssa Farrell, who's the Administrative Services Director, as well as Ann Mullins, who is, of course, our indefatigable community volunteer, and in this case, the chairperson of our Grant Steering Committee. Behind us as well, we have Sarah Roy, the Director of the Red Brick, and Lisa Rigsey-Peterson, the Director of the Wheeler Opera House, who are instrumental as well in our grants development process. Particularly around a artist fellowship grant, which you'll hear a little bit more about shortly. So with that, I want to give a quick overview of our grants process for those of you who are new to the council or who get presented with different things every single week and may have forgotten. So we have 3 core grant divisions that have been ongoing since 2010. Those are our arts and culture, community nonprofit,
and Health and Human Services grant divisions. So those are all separately budgeted and separate applications that are reviewed typically in the late fall, early winter, that come to council in the early spring for your review and approval. This year, at council direction, we are in the process of rolling out 3 pilot grants that are funded only in 2023 currently. The council this time last year directed us to roll out in 2023. So those are an organizational capacity building grant targeted towards health and human services organizations, an Aspen Artist Fellowship grant, which is to support individual artists here in Aspen, and an asset and acquisition assistance grant, which is to support the facilities of arts and culture organizations here in the Upper Valley. So the grant program has been able to make a pretty large contribution to our community over the last 13 years, with over 17 million already distributed to the community. With this kind of budget comes a commitment from staff and our community volunteers to run the best operation that has the highest community impact that we can. And to that end, the grants program has undergone a pretty significant overhaul in 2021 and 2022 to align it with currently accepted best practices. One other thing on the Health and Human Services core grant is for a long time, and probably knows the actual dates, but it was aligned with the Pickens County Healthy Community Fund grant as a sort of addendum application. In, I believe, 2020, that application became a standalone grant applied directly to the city. So with that, I want to give a quick overview of the grant program philosophy that was adopted by council that kind of forms the core of how staff and our community volunteers make grant policy recommendations and assess applications. And I do want to, I hope you'll forgive me for reading this slide, but it's really important and crucial to our grant program, so I just want to reiterate this. The City of Aspen's grant program supports nonprofit organizations that promote a mentally and physically healthy community, provide protection for our natural environment, and create opportunities for connections for all community members through partnerships, ease of access, stewardship, arts and cultural enrichment, and innovation. So that's important sounding and broad, right? But how does it apply to our actual core grant programs? And with that, we have also council adopted strategic focus areas. I won't dig into the details here, but these provide a little bit more actionable information and detail about what council is looking for with our 3 grant programs. And this information here provides crucial information for how our application review criteria is written and assessed, and ultimately how funding recommendations come to council for your consideration and approval. So with that, I want to touch quickly on the people involved in this process, because there is a fair amount of staff, but more importantly, a very large group of community members that are instrumental to this process. We've already introduced Ann Mullins. We have on our grant steering committee, we have Judy Clausen as well, and you interviewed an additional person that will perhaps join us here shortly. The intention with the steering committee is that it will become an all-volunteer committee of 5 before the end of this year. There's currently a few staff members serving on that, myself, and Alyssa, and Lisa behind me, with the intention that as the heavy lift of this grant program overhaul and development eases a little bit, it makes sense to get staff off of that committee and put volunteers on to help provide oversight. But with that, right, we have 15 other volunteers. And these volunteers are absolutely essential for assessing and each application that comes in. So that's upwards of 100 applications a year that these 15 people are responsible for, and their assessments form the basis for the funding recommendations that the grant program presents to you all. So with that, I've touched on our, the alignment with best practices. And I just want to give a little bit of more detail on that because it's really important, right? It's our goal to run a transparent and fair process that has the most impact that we can, but also that we can justify all of our decisions, right? We have a fair amount of resources in this program, and it's important that we're able to communicate the decisions that we make. And so with that, we hired a third-party consultant called Point BE in 2020 to do a deep dive into our program and help us figure out exactly what we should prioritize making improvements to our program. One of those improvements was redefining the staffing structure, which is why you now see me here talking to you as well as a grants coordinator. So we're able to contribute more resources internally into this program, and you can, which allowed us to implement 8 of these 9 core recommendations that came from our consultant. But with those big changes, right, comes a responsibility to our community to check in with them and see how that was going. And so we had the same consultant come back last year, which was the first year where we could really take stock of the major changes we'd made to the program and see how those impacts landed with our community, right? And they came back with kind of 3 key themes for us to keep in mind in program development moving forward. Those are equity, transparency, and clarity. And so these 3 themes, along with the program philosophy and strategic focus areas that I touched on at the beginning, really underpin all of the policy recommendations that come from staff, that come from steering committee for your consideration. So before I move into updates on the pilot programs and a couple other questions for council, is there any questions on the history of the grants program or any of the overview information that I've presented here?
One real quick. If you go back to the steering committee slides, I probably should know this obviously, but how does it work? You have the grant steering committee and then you have all these subcommittees. How does it go through? What proposals go to the grant steering committee and what goes to arts and culture? Or does
That's
it
an
filter
excellent
through?
question.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So basically, the grant steering committee is appointed by city council and acts as a liaison between city staff, city council, and the 3 review committees you see here. So the steering committee is responsible for appointing the review committees, and city council is responsible for appointing the steering committee.
Okay, that's structured. Thank you.
Yeah.
For clarity, the source of all of the funds that we're discussing tonight is the 0.5% Wheeler RET, right?
No, that's not correct. There are several different sources for the arts and culture grants, which are mostly what we're talking about tonight. That is correct, but there are some funds drawn from the general fund as well as the tobacco tax that you were discussing earlier tonight as well.
For the entire grants program. It's the variety of funds.
It'd be helpful for me to have a little bit of information on what comes from where. If we could do that as a follow-up, please.
Thank you.
And John, do you know off the top of your head the total dollars that come from the non-arts and non-tobacco tax, what the general fund number is?
So the community nonprofit grant has a budget of about $550,000, and that comes completely from the general fund, I believe. Health and Human Services is a little bit more complicated, particularly when you add in our intergovernmental agreements that aren't directly allocated by this grants program, but are funded through it. Primarily, those monies, I believe, come from the general fund, but they're supported with tobacco tax dollars as well in isolated cases. And we will follow up with you tomorrow to confirm that information was accurate.
And is Natalie the only staff person that's solely committed to grants work?
That's correct, in a sole capacity. I'm spend about half my time on grants. And then we have Patrick Quick, the Strategy and Innovation Director, spends some time on grants as well as Alyssa.
Would it be possible to determine an annual figure of the cost to administer these grants? Is that something we could figure out?
Yes, we can provide that as well. There's tangible and intangible costs and some approximation of time. And again, the heavy lift was with the Point BE recommendations and revising the program and focusing on developing the charter and moving more towards a software program to administer the grants and setting up the steering committee and whatnot, and now the volunteer committee. The intent is now that the bones are established, that staff begin to transition off the steering committee, and it's 100% volunteers, which also would reflect a reduction of time.
And we did do an assessment on the administrative costs of the grant program for council, I think about 18 months ago, and it was about 7%. And that falls right in line with best management practices of between 5 and 10% to administer a grant program.
Thanks.
Anything else? So with that, I want to give a quick update on our pilot grants. So 2 of these grants, to your point, are funded by the Arts and Culture Real Estate Transfer Tax. That's the Aspen Artist Fellowship and the Asset and Acquisition Grant. The Health and Human Services Capacity Building Grant that we'll also discuss that is a pilot is funded currently by the tobacco tax. All 3 of these programs are, with council approval, are set to launch in May or June of this year. So let's start with the Aspen Artist Fellowship. Our budget for this year is $60,000. Its funding source is the Arts and Culture RET. One important point for these 2 new arts and culture programs that you see comes from council direction the last time that we discussed these programs, of an intention to focus these dollars on a more up valley. Right? One of the core tenets of our primary grants is that there's a much broader eligibility base currently. It's basically anyone who's providing services in the Roaring Fork Valley can apply for those grants. For these new grants, council provided a direction that we should try and bring that focus up valley for some of our new grants. And so you'll see that here with an eligibility for the Aspen Artist Fellowship for individual artists living or working in Aspen. And this grant is really unique because it is our first ever grant that is designed to target individuals. Right? All of our grants, throughout our 13-year history have been designed to target organizations, and this is something totally new and exciting that we're happy to try out. It was born out of a desire to stimulate new cultural vibrancy in Aspen, and to try a different target demographic for that. And that's our artists, both adult artists and youth artists. And so the quick overview on details, right, is that this grant is set to provide a meaningful amount of money for up to 11 adult artists and up to 8 youth artists, $4,000 and $500 respectively. The funds, are not heavily restricted. That's meant to allow the artists themselves to decide, how this money is going to best support their artistic pursuit. That's not to say that these funds are going to come with no expectations, right? There is an expectation of contributing back to the community, and the primary way this grant does this is through a set schedule of facilitated convenings that get these artists together, build community, discuss their work, and talk about ways that they can support and stimulate this community through their artistic pursuits. And I want to turn it over to Sarah and Lisa quickly if you want to chime in on anything I missed.
I would just say that Sarah and I have worked long and hard developing this program as a pilot program. And as John mentioned, it is to help support artistic pursuits. But there's so much more to this program. When we talk about the convenings where we're bringing them together, this is about helping to support their mental health, creating opportunities for artists who sometimes work in isolation to learn from each other, to gain community, and to think about ways that their work can help further their own pursuits, but also be important for our community. And we're really also excited about the youth component. I think that that's a really unique feature, and that's a piece of the program that I think shows tremendous promise.
And I think when we presented this idea to council, several months ago, it was definitely, we were framing this out as an investment. We see this as investing in the creative sector, which is a big part of our economy here in Aspen, as well as investing in the health of our community. Because we know these artists are out teaching piano to our kids, performing in the Aspen Ballet presentations, showing artwork at the Red Brick Center for the Arts, performing in the local theater productions. So this is all, we get to benefit from this, our youth get to benefit from them. And then like Lisa said, the youth component is really exciting because I think it's definitely gonna inspire our young artists and really give them a lot of opportunity. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we going to talk about this?
Yeah, so you feel free to ask questions now or at the end, whatever you'd like to do.
Do you have any more presentation on this?
Not on the Aspen Artist Fellowship.
Okay. But you do want input on each of these programs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'll start. $4,000 seems like a lot. I have concerns about how it's going to be used. I see from my memo what it can be used for, or its intention. And in here, there are some things, for example, it says something about marketing or growing their creative business. I would not want to think that we were giving somebody $4,000 and they spent it all on marketing their business. That would not be hitting the mark for me. I also wonder about, for example, those that have studio space already currently in the Red Brick and their availability to these additional funds. It would not seem to me that somebody who's already enjoying the benefits of city-sponsored arts and culture should be able to get this at the expense of somebody who is not enjoying the Red Brick studio space not getting some of this. So I have some concerns about how this program is going to get off the ground. That's my input. I'm so glad we're doing it. I think it's cool, but I haven't seen such benevolent programs work out. I guess what I'm saying is there's so many people that take advantage of stuff that this one gives me concern. That's where I'm at with this. So I want to share that with you. Other council members, when it comes to this fellowship, do you have any comments or input that you want to share?
No, I think you're actually on the right track. I have similar concerns, especially being an artist. Kind of wish this had happened sooner, but I understand. Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of leeway for, I mean, generally I don't know exactly how Carbondale's program works, but it seems like they actually produce a piece of art. Mm-hmm. And that is the direction that makes the most sense to me. I agree with Tori's sentiment about promoting their own business. Just doesn't seem like, I understand the logic behind it, because I think every artist needs to grow their business. I'm not very good at marketing myself, but I don't know if that's where I would want this money spent, voting for my constituents. I don't know. I think if we can tighten up the requirements a little, I'd be more comfortable with it.
Sam or Bill?
I feel like I echo both of what you guys said as far as like the cost and just like making sure the end result is what we're looking for, whether that be a tangible piece of art and just trying to close all the quote unquote loopholes of using this money in a non-productive way.
Thanks.
I think you bring up great points. I share these concerns. I think it's important to discuss the fact that art isn't necessarily physical and tangible, right? The way this is structured, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just bringing it up. You know, a DJ could apply for this and say they need $4,000 for some new piece of equipment to go perform. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but is that what this is intended for? I don't know. I love the youth aspect of it. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd put everything towards the youth piece of it and build the future artist community in our community. I would ask for more thought to be put into how we make sure that we're getting out of this what we really desire.
Yeah, can I make a quick response? So I do want to reiterate that this program was born out of a desire from council to stimulate cultural vibrancy, right? And cultural vibrancy is a hard thing to pin down and a hard thing to define. And so I absolutely agree that there is, a struggle here to exactly articulate what the public gets back from this money. But it is trying to create vibrancy. And so we absolutely hear your feedback about trying to tighten up some of those requirements. I do want to ask Sarah to speak to the red brick tenant eligibility specifically, because that was something that we've had a fair amount of internal staff discussion on.
And I wouldn't, sorry to add one thing, I wouldn't necessarily think about it as only tightening up criteria. You know, we have a committee that will help award and select this, right? And I trust in that. I know some of the names on there. I think you have a great committee there and smart people on there that I would defer to and know a lot more about art than I do. But maybe there's some unique ideas about how we figure out, is this money, if we give it to X person, going to help achieve that community goal of artistic vibrancy?
And that is,
I don't know what that criteria is right now.
And that is absolutely an application question and a core tenet of the review criteria.
And I will say, when we had earlier presented this to council, we had done a lot of research, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head, the many grants that we look to, both on the national level as well as the local level, one being the Carbondale Arts, who actually are just giving benevolent money to artists without a stipulation of creating something in return. Because by doing that, we're really just paying them to create a piece of artwork. But this, we're investing. Again, don't think of it as we're giving money, we're investing in these artists to go buy a piece of equipment, to take a class, to learn how to market, to experiment, to maybe even fail in their art making, because all of that is learning that then creates the cultural richness that we have here that we get to go enjoy. To the question about the Red Brick Center for the Arts, the nonprofits that are currently in the Red Brick are eligible to receive a grant as well. So I started to see that as a little bit of an equity issue, that if we were to parcel out the artists and say they're not allowed to receive a nonprofit grant, that where the nonprofits are, excuse me, if the artists aren't, but the nonprofits are. And then we also invest in our artists in the community in other ways. So our artists get to participate in the farmers market. So start to question, that's a really great thing for artists. I know that's a big money maker in revenue. So again, that's a great investment that the city does to allow artists to participate that way. Should they be taken out of this grant? So that's, I think when your question was, should the Red Brick artists be taken out of this grant or be not made eligible? Is that correct? That's where I see.
Just as one class, maybe there's others that I'm not talking about, but maybe there's others that are enjoying grants. You understand what I'm saying? My issue here is that I just know there's people that take advantage of opportunity, and I just don't want to find us a year from now going, oh boy, look what we did. look who got this. Look what we've got in return. I don't want to miss the mark. That's why I was saying like 4,000 is a lot, you know? So I appreciate that. I know that you've had these conversations. Yeah, the idea here is we were talking about spreading our arts and cultural money across artists and in our community, really hitting our community with this so that it is felt and so it's seen. And so again, I'm questioning whether that setup is the best way to get that done. I think Bill said it correctly. You know, what are we using as a measure to say that this is going to create cultural vibrancy and such? Anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you've considered it. I think it needs to be considered for equity's sake.
In a way, it's a bit of a gamble for a year, right? It's a new program.
Sure is.
They give out 60 grand. In a year's time, we say, what are the results?
It's true.
Show us what you've done.
And-
You know, how has this
exactly.
helped contribute to the
It's true.
vibrancy?
They're all pilot programs. Right.
How did $4,000 come up? Where did we come up with $4,000?
There was an amount approved for the grant program. We wanted to make sure it was a manageable number, particularly with the cohort convening portion of this grant. It's not as if we're going to write a check to someone and then we're never going to see them again. This is going to be a program which encourages and requires these artists coming together regularly, and at the end of the program to give a presentation to the community. So 11 is a manageable number. If you have more than 11 people that you're trying to convene, it gets a little complicated. So we were working with the constraints of the budget and what was realistic in terms of how we'd administer the program. One other thing I'd add is this is a competitive process, and so people are going to have to write applications about how they think they're going to be able to best make use of this money. And we have a review committee that is going to, just as we've entrusted them to allocate money in other grants, say, this is the best, this is the person we select. This person wants to create a website. This person wants to, engage, I'm not even gonna, I can't even come up with what it is, but remember that there is a full review committee. It's a competitive process. And if we trust in the review committee to make smart, good decisions in this pilot year, I think that will go far.
I appreciate all that. We're butting up against 7 o'clock here, so I want to move this forward. I would just say, I would ask your consideration. I would reduce the 4,000 and do a few more artists. I would even if you moved $1,000, 3,000. I am a visual artist, and I know what $4,000 would do. I would go out and buy a welding machine. That is a nice gift for an individual, and that's why I just am saying, hey, there's maybe a better way to spread this out, and I'm not going to ask my council members for support on that at this time or anything like that. I'm going to leave it to you and your considerations. John?
Yeah, I just want to add to my previous comments. I believe that the steering committee will award these sums in an equitable fashion. I would like to tighten up the regulations a little bit, but the guidelines, but knowing that these oversight committees are in place to do exactly what we're talking about sets my mind at ease.
And maybe the language could be up to 4,000. Maybe your committee doesn't have to, okay, we did 11 and each of them got. Maybe there's somebody that's like, hey, I don't even want 4,000. So maybe it's up to 4,000. Anyway, I think we've shared our input with you, and we can move forward. And we'll learn over this year.
Right. The one other thing I would add, I know, Tori, you want to wrap this up, but if there's some way to encourage the money to be spent to physically or experientially enhance the arts in Aspen, I think that would be a huge piece of criteria. Couple of examples. Maybe some of the construction acoustic fencing is painted by local artists rather than prints of aspen trees, which is nice. It would be awesome if it was, painted by a bunch of teenagers. I would love to see something like that. Or you know, and this could be like a great use of that money. We pay for the
Yeah.
supplies to do something like that. You know, find Paradise and Andy and Nikos have been generous in doing the music festival concerts in front of the space, but maybe there's a local concert that can happen in front of the space, and there's some, you know, fee that they're using that money for to pay them to allow that, whatever. But something that maybe happens outside the walls of the Red Brick, that happens throughout the community, that really demonstrates and proves that this money is increasing the vibrancy. To me, I think that would be proof that we're accomplishing something with these dollars.
And, you know, maybe we'll get that through the application process, you know, the artists might respond in that same exact way, where they're gonna say, you know, well, I'm gonna do with this money is I'm gonna do something in the, so.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you. I understand for the sake of time, we want to be concise and move on. However, I do need to recap some of the considerations for changes that I'm hearing to summarize from council. So quickly, changing some of the language for up to $4,000. And we hear you in terms of making sure there's a tangible outcome, if it's a physical or expression in terms of enhancing Aspen and the community for the vibrancy. Consideration of applicants that have a studio at the Red Brick, and ensuring that we do have this is a pilot program, and there will be a thorough evaluation and outcome report and communication follow-up with council.
Yeah, that sounds great. You know, if that worked out to where, say you did have somebody who is like, I just want 2,000 or whatever it is, you can use that money for another artist, or as Bill was suggesting, the youth program as well. So if, you know, as you're maneuvering that, as the committee sees its applications, and you're welcome to allocate. You're welcome to allocate. You've got the budget. And I like Bill's suggestion saying, hey, you know, if you want to tap 2 more youth on that, great. Great.
Great. Understood. Thank you.
Ann?
Can I clarify something really quickly? You said consideration of space at the Red Brick. I was thinking more the conversation was going awareness of other city support that an artist is being given, whether it's at the farmer's market or the Red Brick. This has come up in some of the other grants, Health and Human Services. Are they getting other money from the city? And should that be considered when you're reviewing the application? And I think it's relevant. And you may have an application that's strong enough to say that's fine, they deserve everything they're getting, or another application where you maybe, it alters your thinking about it. That was only, so clarification that if it's okay with you guys, that just taking a look at other city support.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will be complex and complicated. We'll do our best on that avenue, especially with our volunteer process and how to evaluate it and recognize it.
Yeah, and it's first year, so hey, if it's a step that we have to step over this year, it's okay. We'll learn. But yes, that was what I was saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next grant, this is also funded by the Arts and Culture RET, and I apologize for the budget typo. This budget for 2023 is $250,000, not $25,000. So just to recap, the objective of this grant, as I spoke about earlier, is to help Aspen's arts and cultural organizations make the most of their facilities or maximize community impact through the purchase of an important piece of equipment. And again, the eligibility for this is also tightened up a little bit to be arts and culture organizations with a physical presence in the Aspen urban growth boundary. So that includes primarily the ABC, the school district. So while the budget is $250,000, it's limited to $50,000 per, a maximum of $50,000 per organization. What's unique about this grant compared to all of our other grants is there is a match required, and that comes directly from council's feedback during the initial development of this grant last year. So if someone wants to ask for $50,000, they need to have at least $25,000 already budgeted and set aside to contribute to the project they're applying for. Also unique to this is that grant requests are either funded or not funded at all, and you know, funded fully or not funded at all. And the intention here is to ensure that you know, the projects funded or the acquisitions funded by this grant actually happen, right? And if someone asks for, you know, $50,000 for a projector or sound system or, you know, whatever it is, and we give them $12,000, that probably won't actually happen, right? You know, another important consideration here is that this is not just limited to organizations who own their facility, right? We wanted to be as equitable as we could with this process, and recognizing that you know, typically organizations who own a facility in Aspen, you know, may not have as much need as organizations who are renting, but we also want to ensure that the funds are being used you know, to the end purpose of this grant. So there needs to be a long-term lease of at least 5 years in place for an organization to be eligible for this grant.
So on this one, the third match requirement is, I guess a better way to say that for me is a project that is total of $75,000, they would be eligible to get 2/3 of it from this program.
Correct.
Right. I don't know that that's kind of what I didn't know that that was the conversation necessarily at council table. I'm okay with it, but that's a little different than kind of matching scenarios that we've done in the past, right? So maybe it would come out in this, it would be if they had $100,000, we would match 50, right? 50-50. Or you would say that if somebody had a $30,000 project, oftentimes we would take the third and not the 2/3 of that share. So again, this is a pilot program. I'm okay with it. This is something that we kind of heard bubbling from organizations themselves. So I'm interested to see how this goes. But again, I'm willing to try.
Yeah, I think this fits in with my comments from, again. Hey, I'm Rachel. I'm going to say basically the same thing I said about the last ones. It's a year-long program. We can change it if necessary in a year, and there's a steering committee overseeing this. I trust them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could you help me, not having been at the table when this was conceptualized, understand what the need is and what the purpose of this is?
Yeah, so this program really came almost directly from conversations with different organizations throughout the valley as a way to put some of this, the new resources in the arts and culture, real estate transfer tax to use supporting these organizations in a new way outside of the way that the current city grant program, and that was helping them invest in their facilities, right? And you know, most grants, right, help people with shiny things like program development and new things, and that's really important. But it's also really important for you know, an organization to have a working heating and cooling system and to have you know, the materials that they need to get the most out of their programs. And that's something that I think we're really proud of with our grant program, is we're willing to fund operational expenses in our core grant programs, and we're willing to, and this program kind of continues that model, right, of being willing to fund the things the organizations actually need in addition to the things that, you know, look really nice.
Thanks. Could I have some tangible examples? I'm sure you have organizations that are already asking for these things or getting in line. I just don't get it. But that's not to say it's not necessary. I just can't come up with the examples in my head.
Yeah, so you know, we don't have specific examples, you know, from the community yet because this application has not yet opened.
But the examples that we heard last time were anything from equipment upgrades, And again, keep in mind, these are all nonprofits, but equipment upgrades and facility upgrades. So whether that's projectors for film or even supplies in some areas, but yeah.
But from who? From like Aspen Film? Or, I mean, Wheeler's funded way too much, as we know, so they don't need money for a new projector. No offense, it's a lot of money that's sitting there, a lot of money.
Because they got one.
Right.
Because they did need a new projector.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry if that came across as insulting anyway, it's just a lot of money. But like, who else, what other nonprofits have facilities and equipment needs? Maybe I'm naive, but.
Yeah, well, for instance, this is completely hypothetical, but Theater Aspen might want to replace their theatrical stage lights with LED instruments instead of incandescent, and that's a major purchase, that's a capital purchase. That's the sort of asset acquisition that would be eligible for this kind of grant application.
And again, in a pilot program, right, one of the core tenets of our overall grants program philosophy is innovation, right? And so one of the things we're most excited about with all three of these pilots, right, is to put these out in the community and see what kind of great ideas we get and come back to council, react to those ideas and see what needs to change, if anything, in future years.
I'm struggling with this one, and I did not come into this meeting with this pre-baked. I don't see the need, and I think that there are bigger needs in our community. All of us have heard a lot from parents and the school district about how much support for arts and culture is needed amongst youth in our community. I'm not sure I see Theater Aspen and other nonprofits lining up begging for new lighting equipment on their stage that they can't fund privately. I haven't been here, so maybe I'm missing it, but I think this is our biggest financial request, and I'm not sure why, and I'm not sure I get it, and maybe the ship has sailed on the approval for that, but I just don't get it.
We did hear from some organizations about some needs in this area. One of them is the schools, as a matter of fact. So, this is just what we heard. This is the feedback we got from our community, and we responded by making this available. Bill, you might be absolutely right. There's 5 slots of $50,000 available through this program. We might only get 2 applications. You just don't know. And we heard that there was a need for this from our arts organizations. Keep in mind where we're coming out of. We're coming out of 3 years of locked doors, non-participation, revenues dropped off a table. So maybe conditions have changed. And like I said, you might be absolutely right. This might not be applied this year, and we'll find out.
And this was the need that we heard from the arts and culture nonprofits. It's not, I don't know how else to say it, it's not sexy, it's behind the scenes, it's the infrastructure. But this was communicated to us when we were developing the programs.
Yeah, I'll be super curious to see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Right.
We done? Okay, yeah, and I was going to add something too. Most grants are for, as John said, for new programs, new things, moving ahead, moving forward. Capital campaigns are usually something big and sexy, a brand new building, this kind of thing. But there is this basic need, if you're going to continue your current programming, take care of your clients, get new programming, you still have to keep your facility up to date. And you can't turn your back on the building you're in or the facility you're leasing. And it may not be, you may need better IT equipment, just the basics. Heating, air conditioning, a new boiler. Maybe you could even, and I keep thinking, hopefully maybe some of these people could partner with CoA and maybe upgrade their buildings with some CoA ideas using this grant, and maybe get some money from CoA too. Could be a partnership there. But so it's just basic ADA improvements. And so this is basic stuff that you can't get a grant for. You can't do a capital campaign for. It's the little nitty-gritty stuff that some of these groups need to stay operational.
I appreciate it, and it just sort of feels like we're looking for a place to use part of this money. And I wasn't here and I didn't hear the strong need for this, but
Well,
I think there might be better needs, and I'm wondering if the use of the city's money generated from this specific tax is best for that use or for an alternative use.
well, and as Alyssa said, this was a common request. It was something that the arts and culture nonprofits really saw as a gap in terms of being able to fund. So.
So just to confirm, council's okay with us rolling out this grant program in May of this year?
Again, as a pilot.
Pilot program.
Yeah. I don't know, is there sentiment up here, would you seek to amend this and limit it from $250,000 down to 200 or 100 or anything? Would you?
Yeah, I would ask for the others to consider allocating some money specifically towards children's arts and culture programs and take some away from this. I know that requires a lot of development, but
Okay.
I don't know that 250,000, I don't feel that 250,000 is needed to be
Okay.
allocated towards this.
Let's just talk about this right here, to put this alongside of children's art programming, I don't think is probably the appropriate conversation match. So let's just talk about this. You're suggesting 150,000? Would you like to limit it to 3 opportunities of 50,000?
Thank you for that suggestion, sure, yes.
Okay. Council members, what do you think here? It's a pilot program. We heard from some. We don't have any specifics yet. This would open the door for 350,000 or more if there's less requests. Do you want to just set it out to see as it is at 250,000?
I'm comfortable with what staff has come up with due to the community outreach that was already.
You owe her an apology.
I apologize. And don't call me Mike. I support this. Staff is behind it. They studied this with community outreach, and we don't know exactly how it's going to roll out. It's essentially an experiment for the first year, so I support this as is. Thank you.
For me, it's not about the 250,000. It's more about what Bill spoke to of other potential needs for this money. So if there's plenty of money and this is a pilot program, I have no issue with this. However, I do want to second the notion that like the Aspen School District, the arts program, education, arts-related education for children has been a big request that I've heard numerous times, and I just think money should be allocated to them and that, or research to see if that makes sense. So it's not about this, it's about just whether there's enough money in this fund to also potentially fund that as well.
That is a whole nother conversation, and I'll address it when we're done with this.
Yep.
So as of now, we'll stick with the $250,000, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. And as a reminder, we can always revisit our overarching grants program philosophy that council has adopted per your feedback, along with our strategic focus areas, the health and human service focus area, the arts and culture strategic focus area, and the community program strategic focus areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Okay, so moving on to our capacity building grant. This has a 2023 budget of $75,000. This program, to be clear, is the application window is open for this, so this is going to be an update, but we would always welcome feedback in the event this program is continued for next year to make improvements. This funding source is from the tobacco tax fund as well for 2023. It is limited to HHS organizations with that have previously received a grant from the city of Aspen in the past couple of years, along with some other criteria like yearly budget to make sure that programs that are applying are large enough to be able to benefit from this type of work. What this grant does is it allows up to 4 grantees to work with our consultant that council's already approved the contract for a few weeks ago, who's John Doherty from Human Services Innovation, is going to work closely with these organizations to help them work on themselves, which is a very fast-growing component of grant making, particularly with health and human services organizations, right? They are kind of hand to mouth, right? I think, and they're so focused on their constituents that they don't make time to work on themselves and to help themselves be more efficient and more impactful as an organization. And so this grant is intended to help organizations be as effective as they can be, so they in turn can have more positive community impact. It's a pretty significant commitment from these organizations to sign on for this, because the end result, is a significant difference internally in an organization. It's a 6-month intensive cohort where the executive director and the chair of the board both have to sign a document, saying that they're willing to make this commitment. And it's really intended to help make our health and human services organizations that serve our community long-term sustainable.
Questions, comments, suggestions? Is this one already out? Are the people already applying for this one?
So the application window just opened.
It just did open?
Correct.
So it's in process?
Correct.
Correct. This one was approved through the budget process for 2023, and this is more of an informational update to council moving forward, and more to come.
So this is one program that 4 organizations can participate in. It's not 4 different.
Correct, because so they'll be working, together on themselves, but also about building collaboration. We have a lot, and it really depends on who applies and who's selected. But finding ways for our health and human services nonprofits to begin to collaborate instead of compete is also an outcome that we hope this grant program can help facilitate.
Gosh, I don't know that this is how you do this.
Feels to me like we're looking for a way to spend this money.
But Bill, I gotta stop. Using that terminology is, you're making accusations right now by using that terminology. And if that accusation is towards me and the former council or towards staff, I would ask you for different language.
I'm sorry if that is offensive at all. I don't mean it that way.
I appreciate that, yeah. Just want to stay clear.
Thank you for putting that out there. It just, the reason I say it is not because of a specific action in the past. It's just, what health and human services organization do we have in this community that has not succeeded? I'm not an expert on this, but I can't think of one. I don't see this problem that we're trying to address.
So, over the last couple of years, this has been an issue. Our health and human services organizations often have times of overlap. They have, in different areas, there has been a lack of coordination. Mental health is one that I could really point to for you. There are so many wonderful organizations in our community that work on mental health for our community, but there was a real lack of collaboration among those organizations for quite a bit. So this is a real thing, but my comments were I don't know about this. I don't know if this is how you do it. And I think one way of what I do take from Bill's comment is the same sentiment that I'm sharing, where I'm not sure this is how you improve that situation.
Right, I think it would be helpful for me, for several of these is, what's the real problem statement? Because I think I'm missing it on some of these. And I think I can help provide solutions or guide solutions if I understand the problem statement, and I'm missing the problem statement here, so.
Happy to discuss further and provide the problem statement. This was really extensively discussed with council and actually within the mayor and council budget for 2023 with the HHS capacity building grants. And you saw it during COVID, right? HHS, they were just trying to survive, throwing out programs as much as they can in terms of the operational strategic alignment or support. There was none. We saw it within the program too, the HHS nonprofit, barely any, not as many as anticipated, or they did not use all the funds because they were just trying to survive within their nonprofits.
Ann, can I ask for your comments here? You know, you've spent many years working for the community in a lot of different grant areas, and especially in this. So, what is your input here?
Well, from what having reviewed these different applications for literally years, I see in the arts and culture realm, there's hard to say, a lot more professional support. There's more money to support the organization, whether it's a expensive grant writing service that's writing the grants, or an accountant that is doing in-kind services for one of his clients who's on the board of this arts and culture thing, and doing those financials. And then you get to, and I always use the example of the Health and Human Services agency that's a one-person, non-paid volunteer doing their work on the computer at the library. You know, and they're really challenged to write grants, to put together financials. Now, this is not geared towards that type of group, because it's geared towards a group that has a budget of $500,000 or more. And I actually question that, because I said it's the smaller guys that need the help. And according to John Doherty, the smaller guys wouldn't have the capacity to engage with him and his capacity building, because they're one person trying to get their own stuff done. But you also see that in the larger organizations, that they don't have the professional support from their board or donors. They're still mostly really grassroots organizations that don't have this kind of overall shiny appeal to a lot of people. And they do need help. They're challenged every day. It's unpredictable what's going to happen in terms of their clients. They have a lot more challenges. And I think one of the best points Alyssa just made is when there was money during COVID, the Health and Human Services agencies were unable to take full advantage of the money that was out there because they didn't have the organizational framework to go after that money. And I think of any group, they need the help. And I think, and Tori made a good point too, in terms of coordination. There is duplication, there's overlap, there's wasted time and wasted money, because some of these organizations could do much better coordinating. We've got the various IGAs. I think there are 3 big IGAs we have that coordinate different agencies within the city and county. And they've proved that this collaboration and partnership is really, really important and really effective. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Thank you, Ann. You articulated way better than I just did.
If I may, Mayor, one more addition, and I'm pointing this out simply. You had a big packet tonight with a lot of attachments. Attachment B describes in this item, which is it's called Attachment B, Health and Human Service Capacity Building. It has a very good outline of kind of defining capacity, from effective governance to strategic planning. Think of these as business functions that a lot of times these organizations don't have time to do, or they don't have the have the ability to hire that outside expertise like a John Doherty, and doing this in a collaborative environment with other nonprofits is a amazing way to do that, right? Strategic communications, client relationships, all of these kind of functions that relate to them as a business entity, they don't necessarily have the time because they're focused on mission delivery and fundraising to make these things happen. Thank you.
Comment?
Yeah, Ann, I really appreciate that explanation you gave us, and I like to think that Ann, John, and Alyssa wouldn't be in front of us with this unless they believed in this. I know a lot of work went into it, and I'm a firm believer that cross-pollination is a great idea. The more people that can get together and talk about their commonalities and differences, the better off we all will be. So, and I think bringing on John Doherty is a stroke of genius. He really helped facilitate finding a new director for CoA.
And Lift Up.
Yeah, so, yeah, I fully support this. I think this is a fantastic opportunity.
And again, this is a pilot. I mean, hopefully it'll be just wildly successful.
Right.
But we'll reevaluate in a year.
Thanks.
All right.
So lastly, I want to shift to our core grants in the fall. And so, you know, we've talked a lot about cash grants tonight, right? But there's also a really important part of our grant program that doesn't involve cash at all, and that's our in-kind grant services. So this is, you know, for basically use of city facilities, city staff time, city resources, things like ice time or pool time at the Aspen Recreation Center, event nights at the Wheeler, use of the Aspen Golf Course for an event, things like that. And historically, there has been no set budget for in-kind services. There's been, you know, frankly, until last year, these requests were kind of treated in our application process as an afterthought. But these requests have also been increasing dramatically. I believe that they've increased 200% in 2 years. And it's getting to a point now where they're butting up against the capacity of the respective departments affected by these grants to accommodate them. And with that, right, comes a desire from staff and the grant steering committee to start to treat in-kind requests more formally like we treat our cash requests. So you know, that means an actual budget, which will help us set expectations with potential applicants about the resources that we have available to give, and it will also help us you know, assess those requests more equitably and more clearly, you know, against the same review criteria that you know, we have our volunteer reviewers assess our cash requests. And so with that, staff and the grant steering committee wants to request council's consideration of adopting a in-kind budget that's in line with the amount of services that we granted in 2022, and leaving that static for 2024, and with the expectation that the steering committee will be in regular communication with council to advise any, you know, changes up or down in the future.
Makes sense. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I do have a question. John, to what do you attribute the increased requests?
So I think you know, there's two answers. One is, you know, with all of these overhauls that we've done to our grant program, right? There's more organizations that know about our grant program and more organizations that are applying. You know, that's, you know, our program is growing, and that's an exciting thing to happen. But it also places more resource requests on the program. but also I think there's more need in the community, right? I see, this is, conjecture on my part, but I think there's two primary other items driving these resources. One of which is the organizations that typically make these requests are small organizations that are feeling budgetary constraints, about the changes in Aspen over the last few years. And also there's fewer and fewer other places for these services to be procured in our community.
Yeah, I'll add a third to that is, in some ways, the grant program was encouraging and steering people towards in-kind. So for example, instead of us giving a cash award to somebody and then having them pay for city services or parks fees or whatever it may be, we were encouraging to say, hey, in-kind is another avenue for you to go. That way the cash grants that you might get can go to things that aren't able for the city to do in-kind. So I think all the factors that John just named as well, like it all kind of work together, so.
And will these or do the in-kind grants get reviewed by part of by one of your committees?
They are, so they're all reviewed by the respective review committee that's responsible for that application.
And is there an avenue, let's use Ice Time as an example, if a nonprofit comes and wants to use Ice Time for some kind of fundraiser, whatever, is there an avenue for them to also pay for it if they decide if they don't get awarded the grant, or if it just makes more sense for them or is an easier path?
Absolutely, and that's already the way a fair amount of those requests work is an organization doesn't get all of the Ice Time they may need through the grant program. They get a portion through the grant program and they have to pay for a portion as well.
Any other follow-ups on this? Okay.
Thank you. And I think we've gone through all the questions I have here, so unless you have any other questions, I think we are done.
We appreciate that. I just want to address the other issue that we were just talking about with the kids funding. First of all, I want to acknowledge for the public, the members of City Council and other staff members received a number of emails over the last 2 days. I want to just acknowledge from the Adam family, the Knaus family, Holly, Kurt Hall, the Stiller family, Wagners, Furmans, Schmitz, Schlossers, Bollingers, Welgos, Farrell, and Ramberg were the ones that sent us in some emails. The point of their emails was in some way to utilize the arts and cultural funding, what I am probably going to forever call the Wheeler-Rhett, for the Aspen School District. These are primarily parents. I don't know that any of them sit on the Aspen School Board or not, but I don't believe so.
Several are on AEF.
On AEF. Their request, a couple of things that I want to say about it. Number one, the city has just changed its grant process and program to allow the Aspen School District to apply for funding, which they have not. So that is an available opportunity for them for some of this. The superintendent of the schools was not aware of these requests and this email campaign that was coming to us until I called him a day ago and had some conversation with him about this. I think we all would like to support kids, youth, and arts. That's something we all want to do. How we do that is the question that we can look into as council members if we want to put more support there. We do already give monies to the school district, and as you know, the school district is its own taxing district entity. They just got a reauthorization for some of their tax dollars. In that was allocated, or the request for the allocation for money towards the arts. So what I want to say in short is that I appreciate the request, but the simple suggestion to take a annual allotted percentage from this fund, I think is just out of place. Again, people that live in the Aspen School District pay taxes to the school district. How those monies are being utilized, and if I'm hearing from parents that they are unhappy with the allocation towards the arts by the Aspen School District, that is a whole nother conversation that I think is necessary before this council considers allocating Aspen taxpayer dollars to another tax district such as the Aspen School District. I am all for more funding for kids and arts. That is what we are trying to do. That's what the previous council has set in motion through several different measures. So we are getting there. But this particular request about using these monies for a direct contribution to the Aspen School District, I think requires a whole bunch more conversation. This is a request that came from parents, members of AEF, but this was done without the superintendent, done without the Aspen School Board, and done without those conversations that I think need to be done around this. If we want to have those, we'll touch on this at the retreat and put this on our agenda for things that we want to discuss. But in short, I just want to say, first of all, we hear you. To the parents that have sent us those, we hear you. Again, I would share that it's a little out of process. And the good news for them is that the school district is now availed and now aware that they are availed to participating in our grants program for arts in the schools, which is really amazing, actually. So I'm all for having this conversation going forward, but getting a dozen emails that are all saying, hey, a simple suggestion is to just allocate this money our way on an annual basis. It is not that easy. It is not that short or simple of a conversation. So I look forward to having it, but I personally am not moved to make any decisions about these requests at this time without a further discussion. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I know that I know we all share the same thing. When we were receiving these emails, we're like, yeah, let's figure out how to do something, but just the avenue that was presented, a little out of time right now. I did speak with the superintendent. He is excited about the opportunity to apply to our grant process, and then we will carry the conversation forward.
I think that's great and well summarized. I think the message, the overall message is important, which is there seems to be a desire, and I know you touched on this, I just want to reiterate it. There seems to be a desire by the community for more arts and culture education for our kids.
100%.
And
as there always is.
Right, and whether that happens inside the walls of the school district or throughout the community somehow, or some hybrid of those two, I think we should react to.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I'll point out that right now the Aspen Art Museum has 3 floors of Valley Kids Arts being displayed right now, including what I had to be told about because I wasn't there, but an amazing new form of art that they are expanding on, which is the puppet theater that they were doing. So, yeah, absolutely. We all support arts for our kids. We're trying to get that connection and our community connection even stronger than ever. We are spending $100,000 to get a committee for these kinds of conversations to happen in our community as well. So we will pick this back up. It sounds like this is something that we do want to revisit, so we will. We will. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. Is there anything else that you guys need from us at this time? Thank you for your long Tuesday evening. We appreciate that. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing. And you have, You have been just amazing in this and leading it up. The question earlier was about the relationship between the steering committee and the volunteers. And you've brought so much experience and leadership capability to this that has really helped us. Last thing I want to...
Thank you.
You're welcome, of course. Last thing I want to say, I was at an arts forum today down in CoA, down in Willits. I wanted to share with you guys, I had two people at our intermission after my panel spoke. I had two people come up to me and thank me for the new program that we put in place last year, as well as the grant treatment that they got. It wasn't just about the fact that they got more or got less. They just felt that the process worked really well, and they felt that it was fair and equitably distributed. So that was just today, 2 comments from people. So I just want to pass that back to you, is that your hard work has been noticed.
We love hearing that.
We love hearing
That's
that.
great.
And I just want to thank our grants coordinator, Natalie Blumentritt, who's not here, but has been, bears a lot of that responsibility for the sentiment in the community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And we will follow up with answers to your questions too. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, unless Diane says differently, that is going to end our agenda this evening. Thank you. Thank you to GrassRoots, as always. We are back in action next week. I believe we have Monday and Tuesday meetings next week. And that includes a regular meeting next Tuesday. For public comment, please see us at 5 p.m. Thank you, guys.